walking boots on.
As long as, yeah, very nice. Walking boots. Very good. I mean, as long as it doesn't all grind to a terrible halt, and as long as they grip the streets and stuff like that, it's fine.
But, no, wait a minute, you want us to be prepared for it?
But no, because they'll go, we didn't buy it this year.
So where do you live? Do you live in this country? Have you been here before?
I do, but, it's not good, is it? It's not good. What about old Anna Sarwar putting the old winter fuel allowance back in?
I mean, putting the boot in.
Yeah, putting the boot into Keir Starmer, so I'm sure...
Well, yeah, but you've got to remember, a lot of the stuff in Scotland, no disrespect to our lovely Scottish audiences, a lot of that is paid for by taxes in England, because it's Scotland is subsidised.
But still a good move on his part. Anyway, Julia Hartley-Brewer's coming next. I'll see you tomorrow.
on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning to you and welcome to the show. This is Talk, the home of common sense, on a snowy day for much of Britain, a bit sleety, cold and miserable for lots of the south. But, you know, it's what we do in the south. I hope you're coping well in the Midlands and the north, where there is quite a lot of the white stuff around. But it's great to have your company. I hope we'll be keeping you cosy and warm in the first proper flush of winter. We are, of course, the home of common sense. And whether you're listening on DAB Plus radio or on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube or on your connected device, it is great to have your company. It's also great to have the company of, welcome back to the show, Mr. Sam Armstrong. How are you, sir?
I'm very well. Good morning.
Now, you've been jolly busy in recent months, handling the campaign for one Mr. Robert Jenrick for the Tory leadership, but you're back.
I'm back.
Can you Bain not offer you a job? She should have after the campaign you ran.
Well, she didn't offer me as much as you did, Julia.
That was sarcasm, in case you were wondering, just in case you're picking up on that on a Tuesday morning. Anyway, it is fabulous to have you back, and I know our audience will be very pleased as well. Right, lots to talk about today, and I bet you can't guess what we're leading with. Of course, thousands of farmers have descended already on Westminster this morning. They're not bothered about snow or sleet or rain, I can tell you that. They're protesting the government's plan to impose 20% inheritance tax on farms. Meanwhile, Chancellor Rachel Reeves has refused to back down, saying difficult decisions have to be taken in order to fill funding gaps, and we need that tax, she says, to pay for the hospitals and our schools. But Yeah, do we? Meanwhile, Dan Street has also refused to say whether Rachel Reeves has broken the ministerial code amid accusations that she lied about her CV. I mean, most people, if you lie on your CV, get the sack. Old-fashioned ideas, I know, but maybe the person in charge of the nation's finances should be completely 100% honest about what banking or economist jobs she actually did do or didn't do, Rachel. If you're watching, do get in touch. Meanwhile, the Welsh Labour government has vowed to change the beliefs and behaviour of the white majority in Wales. Their words, not mine. I'm not quite sure what they think are the beliefs and behaviour of the white majority in Wales that need to be changed, but they're promising to make the country anti-racist by 2030. Welcome to Critical Race Theory. You're very welcome to that. Oh, meanwhile, by the way, the Scottish Labour government, things are getting difficult for the Westminster Labour government. The Scottish Labour government have just announced they are reinstating winter fuel payments for all pensioners. Paid for, let's face it, not just by Scottish taxpayers, but also by English and Welsh taxpayers too. So we'll be talking about that as well. Lots and lots to talk about, and it's great, as I said, to have your company. And I want to hear particularly from you about anything we're talking about today, but particularly about the farmers protesting the new family farm inheritance tax at Westminster today. Tractors on the street, which got Mr. Sam Armstrong got caught in. But I want to know, do you back the farmers or don't you? Tell us why you do, tell us why you don't. Why should, as Labour say, why should farmers be exempt from inheritance tax? Well, they've given some very good arguments why, but I want to hear your thoughts. Love to hear from you if you're joining the protest, if you support the protest, whether you're in the countryside, whether you're a townie like me, whether you think that actually one of the things we need to start doing, by the way, is paying more for our food. Yeah, because actually making sure that farms can run a profit. Maybe they could then make more tax on that rather than inheritance. But give us a call. Tell us what you think about the farmers' protest. Give us a call on 0344 499 1000. You can text 87222. Get in touch on X at Talk TV. Try not to get arrested by the police for anything you write. Calls are charged at the national rate. Text costs £1, standard network rate message. Right, Sam Armstrong, you actually just got caught up in the farmers' protest in Westminster.
I did. I can confirm that there are already tractors in central London.
Because there was a lot of talk about how they weren't going to be tractors, because they're in this difficult line where a good protest, a la Belgium and France, get the tractors, boycott, surround the major cities, and you can cause a lot of trouble very, very quickly. But you also want to keep the public support, which they've certainly got right now. And so there was a talk from the National Farmers Union of not bringing tractors, but they are already there.
I think there are some. Well, look, I think we're going to be looking at different protests. We protest differently to the French, it's fair to say, in this country.
Yes.
I think it was
Well, we don't do it every 3 seconds, for a start, over someone selling us a slightly stale baguette.
Yeah, Charles de Gaulle, I think, said, how do you think... It's impossible to govern this country. It's got 650 different types of cheese. Can't agree on anything. But look, they're here, and I think there's going to be a wide outpouring of public support for these people. These are the core of our national community. They not only keep us fed... I
think you find a former Labour government advisor said last week on telly that we don't need farmers. We should treat them like Thatcher treated miners, because we don't really need the farmers.
Yeah, I thought that was really sad. I quite like John, actually. I thought he's a good guy, but...
He doesn't understand much about how food happens.
No, look... let me be honest. I come from a kind of rural background. There are people in my family that are farming. We have some farming land in my family, so this will affect me too.
Yeah.
And it drives us sick. It drives us potty to see people coming and treating the countryside like it's a theme park, assuming that it is there for them just to admire, and that people don't have to look after it for the whole time. And look, don't forget, this is a devastating change in the tax code that is going to destroy family farms permanently. But it also comes on the back of changes that, yes, the so-called Conservative government made to change the way that farmers are supported. There is no way that farms in the Western world can support themselves today on pure profit. It just doesn't happen. It doesn't happen anywhere. It doesn't happen in the US. It doesn't happen here. There's always subsidies.
We insist on paying... I mean, look, food prices have massively gone up in recent years, and that was a real shock to a lot of people on lower incomes in particular. But I mean, I remember noticing every time, how much was that? I mean, I've just bought sort of 6 things in the supermarket. Like, you what? How much? But in terms of wages and the general, the money we've got in our pockets, actually, food prices have plummeted over the last 50 years in comparison. It may not feel like that right now, but they have. Food used to be very relatively expensive. It's now relatively cheap. It's one of the reasons why people can afford to be fat, by the way, because you don't... The funny thing is you don't find fat people in poor countries. So, you know, funny that. But this is the thing. That profit, we need, I mean, supermarkets, have a 3-4% profit rate, but they are squeezing their supplies, squeezing farmers. Farmers are really, really struggling, living sort of hand to mouth. They might have a lot of land that might be worth a lot of money, but that is effectively their factory. Yeah. We were talking about the show yesterday. You know, so basically, if you want to hand it on to your family, you're going and you farm the same land you farmed for hundreds of years. You are going to have to sell off part of your factory, which doesn't make sense. So I do want to hear your thoughts. But 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. Let's go live right now to the protests in Westminster with our talk reporter Nick Ellaby, who is standing by. Now, Nick, can you explain to us though, because there are actually two different farmers' protests going on today, aren't there?
Good morning, Julia. Yes, there are. There's a lobby with 1,800 National Farmers Union members lobbying ministers personally. That'll take place just by Westminster, Palace of Westminster, a little bit later on and throughout the day. Here on Whitehall, there is a procession from, down Whitehall and down to Parliament Square. We're expecting speeches about 11 o'clock. Kemi Badenoch is expected to be here. She's going to say that she would, if she was in charge of the country, reverse these changes that the Labour government have decided to make to inheritance tax. We are also expecting Jeremy Clarkson to come as well. I just spoke to a farmer from Sheffield. They were at the National Pig Awards together last night, and Jeremy Clarkson promised him that he would be here and he would be giving a speech. Behind me, there's a stage set up on an articulated lorry. There's a lot of hay bales, but they're now being hidden by the crowds behind me and lots of banners saying things like, stop killing the people who feed you, fight the tax, save our farms, no farmers, no food. Farmers here apoplectic about these changes, which would see them pay 20% inheritance tax on estates over £1 million. And actually, they're saying for them, it's existential. This seems to be, this policy, Julia, the straw that broke the farmers' back after, losing those Brexit subsidies after Brexit from the EU. Also, trade deals with Australia, supermarket pricing, TB outbreaks. Farmers tell me they feel a little bit forgotten about by this government, and also they don't feel like they own the land. A lot of them telling me they feel like they're custodians of the land, and all they do is look after it, pass it on to the next generation. And the amount of profit they can actually make is only about average 0.5% on their land, which is very, very low. So this seems to be really the final straw for farmers who feel forgotten about and also betrayed by the government, who did tell them that they wouldn't make these changes to inheritance tax. So strength of feeling really, really high here.
Keir Starmer was very, very clear in that. He categorically would not do that. By the way, I'm still gutted I didn't get an invite to the National Pig Awards, but there we are. Not invited to that. But this is the thing. People, this idea the government has got, well, look, if anyone's got a farm worth over £1 million, you're clearly rich. I mean, most people don't have assets like that. And it's only a 20% inheritance tax, much lower than other people would face, other families would face. But again, this is the key thing. You can own the land, you can own a farm that is worth that much, but you don't actually have the money. So the only way you'd have the money for that, if you handed it down to your family, would be to sell off bits of that farm. And then you can't produce as much, you can't make the profit, you can't survive. And this is the thing. This is something that so many people in rural areas get it. Do you think there's an issue? This is kind of town v countryside here, and that Labour, increasingly a sort of London-centric urban party, just doesn't get it.
I think there is a little bit of that, Julia. There is certainly that amount of feeling. Remember we had 22 years ago, was it now, the protests about fox hunting, but also those concerns about farming and rural communities being forgotten about by people in government. That was a big feeling then, and it is again today. In terms of whether the government, care about rural communities, that basically the Chancellor and the Environment Secretary have both said they understand the strength of feeling. What they are trying to do is raise money to pay for Britain's crumbling services and try to get some extra tax from wealthy landowners. But what this policy is doing, what the farmers say it's doing, is actually catching up people with small family estates that don't make a huge amount of profit. They're already struggling with extra costs of things like fertiliser, and also the minimum wage going up. They're telling me has been making a huge impact in the next 2 years before this policy comes in. So people are at their wits' end over their businesses being viable, and actually for them this is an existential matter going forward.
Yeah, indeed. Really good to talk to you, Nick Ellaby. Keep in touch. If you see Jeremy Clarkson, tell him to come and have a chat with us, and we'll come back to you in the next hour or so. Sam Armstrong, and this is the thing, it's this sort of, you know, quintuple whammy that farmers are being hit by. And this is something interesting, because we've got major retailers as well. They've also complaining about the latest tax rises in the budget. I don't know if anyone was happy with anything at all in the budget. I mean, no one's happy with tax rises, but there are tax rises that hit more than others, are there not? And we've got, I mean, a whole host of top retailers. I mean, literally, I can't even think of any retailer that I haven't that hasn't signed up to this letter today. High street job losses are inevitable, prices will rise and shops will close. That means jobs will go as a result of particularly the national insurance cost rise, minimum wage rise, but also just a huge extra load of costs coming down the line, adding, we're told, £7 billion in cost to the retail industry, still reeling, still from lockdown. We've got Tesco, Amazon, Greggs, Next, Aldi, Asda, Boots, Currys, Lidl, Marks and Sparks, Primark, Sainsbury's. I mean, you name it. I mean, across the board, they are saying, we're in trouble. And this is what we were saying ahead of the budget. You know, this was going to be a tax on jobs.
Yeah, these were not carefully targeted tax rises. These were not tinkering and changing in order to make things slightly better and to say, let's move jobs from ordering online to putting them back in retailers. No, these were swinging. These were wide-ranging. These were blunderbuss, shotgun approach to raising absolutely as much money as you possibly could out of business. It's going to cost Tesco alone £1 billion. This government is intent, it seems to me, on squeezing taxpayers to the pipsqueak. It is agonising, and you can't help but think, isn't there going to be a consequence? And the consequence is going to be that the economy grows more slowly, and if the economy grows more slowly, the result is there'll be less tax in years to come, and this Labour government that seems to be hell-bent on doing whatever it takes to, you know, it says to get the money it needs for public services, fine, fair enough, totally understand that, but if you shrink the economy, if you shrink all sides of the pie, it doesn't matter if you're squeezing one side even more. Yeah. You're just not going to have enough revenue to pay for the services.
And I mean, well, you think that someone like, I don't know, someone who used to work as an economist for the Bank of England, or indeed some major private banks, Rachel Reeves, would actually be able to understand this. And there are some very big questions being asked, are there not right now, about Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor, and her CV for getting, you know, for when you stand for office as an MP. What we're being told about her by the Prime Minister to be as he was then. Look, you know, I've got a great Chancellor. We can reassure we're going to grow this economy. She was a Bank of England economist. She worked as an economist many years, you know, HBOS. She's a senior figure. She gets this stuff. A lot of voters, I think, will have found a lot of that very reassuring. But some rather big question marks being asked right now about her CV.
Yeah, that's right. It seems like maybe there was a little bit of a porky being told. Now, it's not, to be fair, it's not the biggest lie of the century, right?
She's not saying she was an astronaut and she wasn't. We're not, you know.
No, she's not claimed some advanced medical training and performed surgery on a small child or something, right? She's saying that she was an economist for all this time, and then it turns out, oh, well, some of that time you were frankly a complaints handler. She was saying she was here for then, and then it turns out she wasn't there for then, and she seems to have just... She's just oversalted the pudding a little bit.
But again, if you are in charge of the nation's finances, you need to be whiter than white. She literally has her fingers in the purse, on the purse strings.
Especially, Julia, when within weeks of entering government, you have given yourself a massive, totemic, gargantuan honesty problem. Yeah. There is a massive trust issue for Rachel Reeves. She's come into office saying, not going to raise taxes, read my lips, no new taxes near enough. She comes in, she says, oh, there's this massive black hole, it's terrible.
Which
it's
even
terrible.
The Office for Budget Responsibility and the IFS can't find. Yeah.
And then she needs to raise your taxes all the more. Now, all that causes a very, very sceptical public. And then when they hear that you only got the job on the first hand, not just on the promise not to raise your taxes that you didn't do, do, but maybe on the promise of something that was on your CV, which was a little bit iffy, to say the least. People are going to begin to think you are nothing but a common garden liar, Rachel Reeves.
I think if you lie on your CV in most jobs, I think most of my audience right now, if you were working, I don't care whether you're working, you're a dentist, you're a secretary, you work in IT, you whatever job you do, I think that if you lie on your CV about your qualifications, as in what you've actually done, I think you lose your job. I remember here at one point, I mean, being here for a long time, being asked to sort of show proof of my journalism diploma from Cardiff University. I realised I passed it, but never actually got it. I'd never been to a graduation ceremony. I never actually had a piece of paper. So having to write to them saying, could you please look at your records and find proof of this? Because for some reason I'd never used it as, here's why I want the job, because I've got this thing. But you have to provide proof of things that you claim you've got. Otherwise, technically, you're in breach of contract. Now, she has a contract with the British people. I just think this one is not going away. And the fact that Number 10 today has refused to say if she broke the ministerial code because if her CV is deceiving, that then you're in a different territory. I think what someone needs to do is ask her a question in the House of Commons, because then if you lie on the floor of the House of the Commons, they need to ask her categorically, were you this, were you that, did you? And if she changes her story for what she herself has chosen to put on her own leaflets and has allowed other members of the cabinet to talk about, then I'm sorry, I think it is a resigning matter. Yes, I know it's not up there with eating cake on your birthday during lockdown, ha ha ha, but it's a resigning matter. Let's also talk about the very big elephant in the room when we talked about farmers, food prices and taxes going up. We're at war. Now, people might not think we are at war, but the West is at war with various authoritarian, totalitarian dictators, whether that is the Iranian mullahs, whether it is Xi Jinping of China, who we saw Keir Starmer having a nice little sit-down with. Meanwhile, while Hong Kong democracy activists have been jailed for up to 10 years, 45 of them are up to 10 years, a lot of them very young people, simply peacefully protesting, standing candidates, just simply wanting democracy in Hong Kong, which, by the way, we legally guaranteed under international treaty, but just kind of conveniently forgot about. But, of course, it's what's going on with Russia, and in particular with Ukraine. Today marks 1,000 days since Russia launched their invasion of Ukraine. They said they'd take Kyiv in a matter of days. I think it was 3 weeks they thought their entire campaign would last before they had control of the country. 1,000 days on, they've only got a sort of sliver of the country, Crimea, which they've had since 2014. We've now seen long-range missiles being approved by Joe Biden to be used. We expected that from France and Britain as well. Our Storm Shadow missiles likely to be approved. We're told Vladimir Putin, not happy at all, threats of a nuclear strike. He's signed a new law allowing a nuclear strike in response to an attack with long-range missiles. Like Vladimir Putin needs a new law to do this stuff. There is some reports today suggesting those long-range missiles have already been fired into Russian territory. Do you think there's any prospect that this war is going to be over anytime soon? Do you think Donald Trump is going to be ending it in a day, as he suggests?
Well, I mean, Donald Trump is the big X factor because, of course, Donald Trump has always done this, right? He's always talked a big game on ending wars, and actually he uses his persona as someone you don't quite know which way he's going to go in order often to actually extract very good outcomes. So yeah. I think with Trump, actually, you've got a 50-50 chance, in my view, between him surging troops to try and win, surging resources, and ending the war on day one. I don't know. I don't think Vladimir Putin knows. In fact, believe it or not, I don't think Donald Trump knows which way he's going to go. I think you may be right on that. And that actually can play, and we saw that in his first term, to his advantage. I think we saw him make progress in North Korea, for example. I think we saw him do some good things in Syria, for example. By being unpredictable, he has the ability to box his enemy in, quite like Vladimir Putin does, because you turn around and say, oh, well, we can't respond too much because Vladimir Putin will resort to nuclear weapons. He's crazy. Yeah.
Well, there is that. We shall wait and see. And I think everything's on a wait and see till January the 20th, hasn't it? But again, that very hard with Ukraine, settling in for another very cold and miserable winter, attacks on their fuel supplies, electricity grid. Again, people who are protesting and desperately upset about people dying in Gaza don't seem to care two hoots about children children and babies and women and innocent men being killed in Ukraine. I mean, every single man in the Ukrainian army now, you know, conscripted to fight for their country is, you could argue, is an innocent being killed by Russian troops. They're losing something like 1,600 a day in Russia. It is absolutely extraordinary, the bloodshed in that war. But again, you know, it's not Palestinians, so it doesn't really count, does it? Remember those rules? Try to keep up everybody. Anyway, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that, where we are in Ukraine as well, but particularly want to hear from you. And the border's already lighting up. Thousands of farmers protesting the new family farm inheritance tax at Westminster today. Do you back them or not? Tell us why you do. Tell us why you don't. Get in touch. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. This is Talk.
Keir Starmer came and told the farmers at the NFU conference that we would not have any tax rises. Right. And he sat in the hall in front of 3,000 NFU members and lied for an hour. And if Keir Starmer sold every farm in the UK, there would still not be enough money for the National Health Service. It's about time the people of this country woke up. You need farmers. We produce cheap, healthy, good food. And throughout the world, the farmers have been taxed by the political classes, and we've had enough.
Speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
morning to you. This is Talk. Sorry, there's a little bit of a gap in the output there. If you just, I think, on the radio side of things. Apologies for that. We are back. Don't worry, we are here. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. This is Talk, the home of common sense. Sam Armstrong also here as well. We're talking about the thousands of farmers protesting the new family farm inheritance tax at Westminster today. It's 20% on farms worth more than £1 million, which sounds like a huge amount of value and a very small tax for it. But actually, the difference between being able to keep the family farm in the family or not. And of course, they sell it off. Well, who's going to do the actual farming? Because this often we've got farmland that's been in families for generation after generation for hundreds and hundreds of years. So I want to know, do you back the farmers or don't you? Tell us why you do, tell us why you don't. Give us a call, 0344 499 1000. Lots of texts and tweets coming in before we get to those. Peter says, I'm backing the farmers. It's a tough job and we should be doing all we can to keep them in business because we want to have as much homegrown food as possible and not to rely on imports from abroad. Exactly. Food security could quite matter if we're entering a new Cold War or possible Third World War. Reg says yes, because the threshold is not high enough, it's not correctly aimed and needs the site adjusting. Steve says farmers are the backbone of our nation. We can't let the Labour government strangle them with more taxes. I back them 100%. This family farm inheritance tax is just another example of Keir Starmer's out-of-touch policies. He's more concerned with lining the pockets of his metropolitan elite friends than with supporting hard-working Brits. We need to stand up against this tax and support our farmers. They're the ones who feed our nation, after all. Lots of strong support there. Let's go to Dean, who's on the line from Bridgend. Hello, Dean.
Hello, how's it going? You all right?
All right, we're doing very well. How about you? What do you reckon on this farm protest? Are you for them or against them?
I'm for them, but do you know what they should do? They should hang their hands up and go, do you know what? You win. Sell all their land to the housing developers, right? Take all that lovely money they got, go abroad to somewhere that actually likes them, set a nice farm up there, and then watch our country fall to the grave and then say, we told you so.
I could understand there would be a certain sort of smirky justice moment for them. Not so good for the rest of us as we all basically don't have enough food to eat. Because, I mean, the thing is, I know we import food, but you can't always import everything. And, you know, we're not going to be importing our milk every day, are we?
Oh, no, I fully understand that. And I'm from Wales, and there's a big farming community where I live.
Yep.
But at the end of the day is, unless they do this striking, unless they block the roads with their tractors,
yep,
and create proper hell for everybody, then the government's not gonna stop. Because look, all Keir Starmer does is lie. He promised the Farmers Union that he was going to save them, not destroy them. He lied again,
yep,
and surely he's breaking his ethics because he's lying all the time to the British people about what he would do in his manifesto. He lied on that. So he's broken promises after promise after promises. So now it's time for the farmers to go, do you know what? If you want to destroy the country, there you go. Take their money, go and set up a new farm, say in Australia or something, and then go like that, we told you so.
Prove just how vital you are. As I was saying on the show yesterday, when we had lockdown, you know, there are certain people can put up with, you know, the laptop classes not working, but you know what, the bin men don't work and the farmers don't work. Everyone notices. No one had a problem with them being out on the streets, did they? Isn't that interesting? Can I ask you, as you say you're from Wales, the story we're going to talk about later, the Welsh Labour government has apparently vowed to change the, quote, beliefs and behaviour of the white majority in Wales, promising to make the country anti-racist by 2030. Do you think your beliefs and behaviour need to be changed? If you're white, Dean, do they need to be changed?
Well, I got arrested and sent to Cardiff Magistrates Court for calling a cop a woke and corrupt. And because I hurt his feelings, I got a £400 fine.
Wow. And you didn't use naughty. You didn't use naughty language. You weren't threatening. You just said he was woke and corrupt.
I said you are a woke and corrupt policeman. I said, look what's going on here, and you're not actually doing anything. And he arrested me, and then I got sent to hurt his feelings.
Hurt his feelings? I mean, I think you need to join the Free Speech Union, mate.
I know. Well, it is what it is, and I think I've got one of those hate things in
non-crime hate incidents against you.
Yeah, I think I got one of them as well because I went to crime court.
Wow. I mean, well, it's probably more than that. It's the actual crime. Who knows? Well, there you are then. What an interesting little exchange that was, Dean. Thank you very much indeed. You used to work at the Free Speech Union, so you still do work for them? I mean, yeah, I suppose we'll digress. I don't want to get too... Let's go to it now. I've got to be honest with you. Our next caller, I've actually just muttered to my producers, is this a caller for real? Tarquin is on the line from London. Now, Tarquin,
I want to Mr. Yes, you talk to Mr. O'Sullivan. I'm a regular caller to Kevin's show.
Okay.
Yes.
No, but I just saw the ball. But here's the thing, Tarquin. If I was going to say we're going to have someone, a farmer, somebody who lives in a rural community, someone from Wales, then I'll say, let's talk to someone, a Tarquin from London, and here you are on the line. With no disrespect, look, I'm called Hartley-Brewer.
I know. I get it.
What do you make of the farmers' protest?
Well, can I just? I need an earlier point to lead into that to answer that very question. What it is? Number one, according to the terms of the Fraud Act 2006, making a material gain by misinformation of a CV is a crime. It's an indictable offence. That's number one. The First Lord of the Cherry should be...
You're talking about Rachel Reeves CV, aren't you?
He should be recalled because he needs to... a new Chancellor should need to be appointed. If that doesn't happen, then there are two-tier judiciary because people who, in one situation, are summarily marched through the courts and into bars, and others clearly won't be. Now, that's number one. Now, the point to answer your question, given that we are now in a situation where if those attacker missiles are being fired into homeland Russia, then we are effectively approaching a state of emergency, if not worse. A Cobra meeting should be called. Food is now a strategic asset. Anything that they're tinkering around, this party political people, that should stop. I mean, there should be a cease and desist note at a constitutional level to stop that right now. Stop messing about. We're going to need our food supplies, and it has to stop, Julie, because this is getting very, very student politic and very bloody dangerous.
What do you make of some of the plans? I mean, the Farmers Union are saying, look, they don't want to, they want to keep within the law. They don't want to sort of, annoy the general public the way, Just Stop Oil and that lot do. They want to be, keeping the public on side, so staying within the law, so not sort of causing too much disruption. But there's some talk about farmers striking over, food production.
Well, this is all conjecture. We don't know, and I wouldn't certainly be a consultant to advise on what course of action would be best, because as we all know, we have to stay within the law. We have to do that, no matter whether we might not agree with it, but we have to. Yeah. And we're not going to get a recall of Parliament to debate this, which we should, when we don't really have any direct democracy
Parliament's
anymore.
sitting right now. You don't have to recall Parliament.
Well, but in the sense that they're not going to address the issue. They sidestep everything that's the important stuff, don't they, Julia?
They do that. Tarquin, we'll leave it there. Listen, thank you so much for calling. I very much appreciate it. So 10:35 is the time. I'm going to take a quick break. We'll come back with Sam Armstrong. We're also going to be talking to the host of the Farming Funny podcast, farmers Nick Thompson and Sandy Kirkpatrick, out on the protest and get their thoughts on that. Also going to be talking about the Welsh government deciding to, sort out their white Welsh compatriots for being, frankly, a bit too racist, apparently. This is Talk, the home of common sense.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense. 10:38 is the time. Let's go live now back to the protests in Westminster by farmers. So 2 separate protests. National Farmers Union got 1,800 members meeting with ministers and MPs, actually meeting face-to-face with their local MPs. 100 Labour MPs now in rural constituencies. We're wondering about how long they're actually going to still be an MP with this new law, putting inheritance tax 20% on farms worth over £1 million for the first time. Basically seeing a lot of farmers saying they basically won't be able to hand down their farms, won't be able to continue producing our homegrown food. Well, let's talk to Nick Thompson and Sandy Kirkpatrick. They're both farmers themselves. They're at the protest and they're also hosts of the Farming Funny podcast. Good morning to you.
Morning.
And thank you so much for joining us. Well, look, what would be really helpful is explaining to a lot of people, us townies, why this new tax is going to hit so hard. It's much less than inheritance tax that most people would pay. People would go, £1 million farm? You've got a massive asset. Most people in this country don't have an asset worth £1 million. Why is this such a problem for so many farmers? Why are people on the streets today?
I think I think the British government and the British public really need to decide where their food's going to come from. In an increasingly uncertain world with, wars in Russia, wars in the Middle East, you've got China, you've got a US president-elect coming. Do you really want to outsource or offshore a basic need for society? And I think that really is the question. It's about food production, food security in this country, and that, I feel, is the question that the British government and the British public need to answer.
And in terms of if these farms are taxed at this rate, and of course, someone needs, sadly, to die for this inheritance tax to kick in, that would mean a farm doesn't get handed on to their son, their daughter, other family members because they wouldn't be able to afford it. What would happen to that land then?
Well, the problem is, everyone talks about all this millions and millions of pounds in farming. We never see any of that money. That just gets handed on down. So, it's not a case that we have all that money lying around that we can hand on. So, the generation of my father handing it down to myself, we might manage to pay the tax, but certainly me handing it down to my children, we definitely wouldn't manage, and we'd have to sell land and assets to keep that going.
And we know Jeremy Clark.
What's going to happen is that...
Carry on.
Well, I was just going to, in answer to your question, what will happen is the vast majority of farmers won't be able to buy that new land that's come to market. So you're going to get a whole load of institutional investors coming into the game who don't have the experience, who don't have the knowledge to be able to produce food at a commercial scale. And so you're going to lose not only the land, you're going to lose the skills, the knowledge and the expertise that we are able to produce food in this country. And I think that is a serious concern that the government needs to address.
Absolutely. And we saw that played out in Jeremy Clarkson's series, The Farm, didn't we? Which was a great way of teaching townies like myself how farming actually works and what incredible back-breaking work it is 365 days a year, because the cows need milking, the fields need tending. It's such a hard job, and the turnover might be big on some farms, but the profit margin is absolutely tiny. It's part of the problem that we just don't pay enough for our food anymore, and we want the supermarkets to keep food prices down, and food prices, although they've gone up a lot lately, actually over 50 years or so, they've massively fallen as a percentage of what we have in our pockets. But we expect supermarkets to keep prices down. They squeeze you guys, the farmers, the suppliers. Maybe we need to understand that we need to pay more for good quality homegrown produce.
I think that's going to inevitably happen. I think that the margin in food for farmers is not what people think it is, and our costs are constantly going up with, as Sandy talked about, all the different things going on in the world. So for us, the margins aren't what people think. We do have, a fantastic asset there, but we don't see any of that money. So, I think what will end up happening is the price, it can't go any other way.
No, indeed.
I think a lot of people look at farmers and think, I was going to say, I think a lot of people look at farmers and think that they have this huge asset. But as Nick said, that money's never realised. The margins in farming are so small, and people think, you have £1 million worth of asset and think that, you've got £1 million to spend. But that's just not the case.
No.
Farming is an incredibly difficult job. Food is too cheap in this country, and something needs to change.
Do you think the government is going to listen? We've heard, Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor, who brought in this tax in the budget in October, saying, look, we need to tax farmers like everyone else to pay for hospitals, to pay for the NHS, to pay for schools, and people need to pay their fair share. Do you expect that she is going to change her mind?
If history tells us anything, governments tend to have a fairly poor reputation of turning around on stuff like this. But we're here today and we're turning out in support to put pressure on the government to at least reconsider their proposals for APR and BPR in the budget a few weeks ago.
There's no doubt at all you've got a lot of public support. Are you quite surprised by how much the public is backing the farmers' protests?
Well, not really, because, you'd hope that the public know that without us, that the food doesn't come from this country. So you'd hope the public are behind us. I think most people know a farmer. Most people know how hard and how long hours they work. Most people want to have good British food. So, no, I'm not surprised. I hope more and more people understand why we're here today.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I think as well it goes beyond just food production. It goes beyond just food production as well. You've got to look at the, farmers maintain the British countryside. They tackle the environmental goals that we have in this country as well. And I think the British public want to support us. They want to support British food. They want to know where their food is grown to the highest production standards and maintaining this beautiful countryside that we have in this country. So it's not surprising that we have the support that we have, and it's great to see here today.
Yeah, absolutely. There's lots of people on the streets today, not put off by the miserable, grim, cold, wet weather. You guys are used to that every day of the year, aren't you? Good luck to you on your protest. Stay dry and warm as you can. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us. That's Nick Thompson and Sandy Kirkpatrick. They're both farmers and hosts of the Farming Funny podcast. It is interesting, Sam Armstrong, isn't it, that you just back in a nice, warm, dry studio. They're not going to be put off by the weather, are they, today? You get the Just Stop Oil lot going, oh, it's raining, let's stay in today. Don't care so much about Gaza, some people would say, because it's raining today. Farmers are out there. This is about their livelihoods, their futures. But again, and as Nick Thompson said, first of all, there about, food security. 55% of our food in this country is homegrown. We rely on food. What are people going to do? We're just going to just import it all from Chile and Bulgaria? Sorry, but that's not safe and secure.
Yeah, and by the way, we've cut our farming subsidies and we now only pay farmers in this country to quote-unquote make environmental improvements. That's all we're interested in paying them for. Put in a new hedgerow. That's all we're interested in paying them for, right? You think when we import millions and millions of tons of grain, potatoes, whatever, from overseas, that they're coming from countries with the equivalent environmental standards that we got? You think they have?
Yeah.
Pull the other one, right?
So even if that is your concern, you're not even doing that deal.
It's just the entire management of the whole British countryside over the last years has just been a walking, talking lecture in why middle-class, PPE, London graduates that sit around attending dinner parties should never, ever, ever, ever be put in charge of something about which they know little but have strong views.
Yeah, but this is the thing, isn't it? I do think this is a town v countryside thing, because I do think people... See, I don't know anything about that life. I'll just say, other than watching Clarkson's The Farm, which, again, I think has educated the British public beyond anything else in terms of how hard life is and what has to be done. But that's what I find extraordinary. I just don't think people who don't understand these things should be making changes. I don't even understand how DEFRA, the Department for Environment, and the Treasury can't even agree on what percentage of farms are likely to be affected by this. Certainly they don't agree with the National Farmers Union, who say, look, they reckon 7 out of 10 farms could be affected by this, and the impact of that will be people selling their farms. Well, what happens to their farms? They're not all going to be housing developments, but the idea that the knowledge, the skills of farmers through the generations will be lost is going to be devastating for our countryside. But someone will go, oh, I'll just do a degree in that, and I'll read a book, and then I'll understand it. Well, yeah, how's that working out for you? You need your Caleb. That's what you need. You need your Caleb to help you.
Yeah, but look, it's going to be people like Caleb that suffer, actually. It's going to be individual small farmers that are ones that are going to miss out.
Jeremy Clarkson said he's all right. Look, I've got other income. I'm OK, but he's going to be there today, despite a heart problem and doctors saying do not do that.
Yeah, by the way, the bigger states will just move all of their assets out of the country. They'll say it's owned by a trust overseas. And what you'll see, actually, is that the change we saw over the last 100 years, where more and more small farms emerged and farmers began to own their own land, that'll stop. We'll go back actually to a pretty feudal system, and that will be the long-term legacy of this Labour government.
And our countryside will look very different as well. When you look at our green and pleasant land. Well, speaking in the last few moments, the Environment Secretary Steve Reid, who has chosen not to meet with farmers today, funny that. He has said it is only right that Labour asks the wealthiest landowners and the biggest farms to pay their fair share. He says, I would emphasise only around 500 farms will be affected. The vast majority of farmers will pay no more under the new scheme. Again, that has all been disputed by the National Farmers Union. 10:48 is the time. Do appreciate you getting your calls in. Keep them coming. 0344 499 1000. Up next, we are going to be talking about what's going on in Wales, as the Welsh Government has pledged to make Wales anti-racist by 2030 and is going to change the views and the attitudes of the Welsh people. Sorry, white Welsh people. I wonder what that can mean. We'll talk to Amy Gallagher about that up next. This is Talk, the home of common sense.
Also, we hear that Donald Trump is quite keen on using Rwanda as a possible destination for the mass deportations. I mean, you guys have not been in favour of Rwanda, have you, Reform?
We never thought it would be a deterrent. We said, actually, the only deterrent is to do what Australia did, which is to pick up and take back.
Yeah.
And then to process rapidly and deport back to where they came from. So... but you've now got, I mean, you've got a Prime Minister that's sort of throwing cash around all over the place, whether it's Vietnam or whether it's other nations.
It's a great idea to give Iraq some money, I've always thought. I mean, you know, what is he thinking?
Smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning to you. This is Talk, the home of common sense. Thank you very much indeed for joining me. 10:52 is the time. Let's talk about the Welsh Government today. Scottish Government also in the news. They're bringing back the winter fuel payments for all pensioners in defiance of the Westminster Government. That'll be a very popular move. I wonder if the Welsh Government is going to think of that. Oh, no, they're busy doing other things. What they want to do right now, rather than, you know, I don't know, helping farmers or helping people who are worried about putting the heating on in their old age, is they want to vow to change the beliefs of the behaviour of the white majority in Wales. They have a new anti-racist Wales action plan promising to pursue shifts in knowledge, beliefs, experiences and behaviour alongside systemic and cultural changes. This is an updated version of a document published last week, including a foreword by the Welsh First Minister, Eluned Morgan, where she speaks of building an inclusive and equitable society for all of our black, Asian and minority ethnic people and communities. And it will include shifting in the beliefs and behaviour of the white majority. Well, I wonder what it is they believe and they behave in, which way they behave, that it needs to be shifted. Let's talk about this with commentator at the New Culture Forum, Amy Gallagher. Good morning to you, Amy.
Morning, Julia.
I mean, this is a gloriously sinister document, isn't it? Just first of all, it's an anti-racism action plan. Now, I mean, I'd like to think we're all against racism, but anti-racism isn't quite the same thing as that, is it?
Yeah, so anti-racism doesn't just mean the absence of overt racism, as most people would understand it, and most people would probably agree with. We don't want overt racism in our society. What it actually means is white people having to feel bad and guilty about themselves all the time and being told to do whatever they're told to do, regardless of how stupid it is. And if they don't, that means that they're racist. But they're racist anyway because they're white. It comes out of something called critical race theory, which basically means all of Western, they believe that all of Western civilization is built on white supremacy. So in order to solve that problem, you have to tear down all the institutions within Western society. So it's
including the Welsh government, I would have thought.
Well, indeed, exactly. How they differentiate between which ones are racist and which ones aren't, I don't know. And as you said, they say that the beliefs and behaviour of the white majority need changing, but they don't say exactly what the behaviour is, what the beliefs are. There's just an automatic assumption that they must be racist, and they don't say how they're going to change it.
And the thing about sort of anti-racism, this theory, is, again, it's not about, as we were brought up, certainly I was brought up, and, the Martin Luther King line, judging, people not according to the colour of their skin, but according to, what, their character, the content of the character. But actually, it's about being aware of race all the time and judging and treating everyone differently because of their race, which I, last time I looked, thought was racism. But there we are. But it is an extraordinary thing that they're going to do. And they're going to achieve all this by 2030. It's quite a short timeline, a lot of people might say. But, I mean, what do we think the beliefs and behaviour of the white majority are that are so troublesome?
Well, this is the thing. They don't say, and they don't feel that they need to say. There's just an automatic inbuilt assumption that there is a problem. So they say they want to transform the Welsh country by 2030. If you look at some of the things they want to do, they want to decolonise Welsh history, which means changing the history. In other words, lying about history. One of the kind of madder things that they come up with was creating dog-free zones. Because one lone African woman in a focus group said she was scared of dogs, so therefore they need to create dog-free zones. I mean,
I know a 3-year-old scared of dogs, but it wouldn't mean I'd create a dog-free zone.
Exactly, and it means spending hundreds of thousands of pounds on teaching librarians and other institutions about critical whiteness studies, telling people to avoid meeting in buildings that have links to slavery, and it goes on and on and on.
Oh,
and
Amy,
I know.
It's bewildering. I mean, it's laughable. If this was in a Monty Python sketch, you go, oh, this is quite witty and clever, ha, ha, ha. If this was in a fictional novel, a dystopian, Hollywood movie, you go, fair enough. But this is happening in the real now. And presumably, of course, Wales is, everything's going absolutely brilliantly in Wales. Everyone can find affordable, good housing. Everyone can get a job. Everyone can pay their bills. There are no children who are in care. The hospitals are all working brilliantly, no waiting lists. The schools are all brilliantly delivering A grades for everyone. I mean, presumably, transport, brilliant. Everything's going brilliantly in Wales right now, which is why the government has got time to do this. Is that right?
Yeah, so rates of poverty are higher in Wales than they are in England, Scotland or Ireland. And we know that 21% are living in relative poverty in Wales. So, the Welsh government have a few more issues that they need to focus on.
That's probably down to white people being racist, isn't it?
God knows what. But I think what a lot of this is that the real problems are very hard to fix. So if you can create fake problems that don't exist, say you're solving them by just doing kind of virtue signalling wokeness, then you can look like you're doing something and say you're doing something when actually you're avoiding all the real problems in the country.
Yeah.
I think that's partly what this is.
I think it is, and also a little bit of self-flagellation for being white, which apparently is what we're supposed to do now. Amy Gallagher, always good to talk to you. I wish we were talking about something sane one time. She's a commentator at the New Culture Forum. Sam Armstrong, again, I keep thinking these things are fictional. I mean, a lot of the papers now, I mean, the Telegraph in particular and the Mail have been very good at highlighting a lot of this utter madness. But this isn't coming from some weird little group, you know, meeting in an Islington cafe, you know, sort of, you know, Wild Bean Cafe. This is coming from an elected government that is in charge of keeping people safe and running health services and schools and transport.
The fox is in the chicken coop. These people have shown you what they think. They have shown you what they feel. They may protest a little bit. They may try and hide it a tiny bit. But underneath...
At an election.
They hate they've said they hate the countryside. The countryside is racist. We've been told the countryside is racist. So what are they doing? They're declaring war on the farmers. They hate traditional values. So what are they doing? They're changing the school curriculum.
Most people have no idea what their kids are being taught right now. You should be scared, people. You should be scared.
They're, frankly, if you ask me... I don't want to sound like all J.D. Vance here. They're normally cat people, so they're declaring war on dogs and making dog-free zones, right? These people are winning out their own personal predilections, prejudices, dislike of many of the things that make this country so great through public policy. They did it in Wales. Wales is just 5 years ahead of what they where we are here.
Absolutely.
It's coming here too.
It really is, and you see the madness is being played out in America, and we import all of this stuff. I mean, I'm hoping Donald Trump is going to put a stop to some of this. That would be a good enough reason to vote for him alone. Thank you very much for that. I'd love to hear your thoughts on all this, especially if you're in Wales. I mean, if you are one of these horrible, ghastly white people, do get in touch. 0344 499 1000. Just to let you know, the farmers' protest in Westminster. Jeremy Clarkson, of course, he runs Diddley Squat Farm in Chipping Norton. He has arrived at that protest. Thousands of farmers protesting in Westminster, meeting with MPs, protesting on the streets. Jeremy Clarkson, if you're around, we'd love to talk to you. This is Talk. Do stay tuned. We are, of course, the home of common sense.
your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning to you. This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. It's great to have your company, whether you are watching us on YouTube or your connected device, listening on DB Plus Radio or on your smart speaker. It's great to have your company. Great also to be joined by commentator Sam Armstrong, who after a brief little flit away to run a campaign for the Tory leadership, not his own, Robert Jenrick's, he is back again.
Next time.
But next time. You're going to run mine next time, aren't you? I'm going to have to set my own part, the JHB party. Would you come and run my campaign?
Well, I hope I'm not spilling secrets here, but you were sort of getting yourself into a bit of a fight with another former Tory leadership candidate at a party last week over whether or not I would run your campaign or his.
Oh, yeah.
Only to remain nameless.
We can say who it was, but... No. But anyway, yeah, not a fight, a little jokey war of words. What can I say? Anyway, I was going to win. Anyway, I'm with you live all the way until 1 o'clock now. Coming up in this hour, thousands of farmers have descended on Westminster this morning to protest the government's plan to impose 20% inheritance tax on farms. Jeremy Clarkson has arrived in the last 5 or 10 minutes. He's called on the government to please back down on that inheritance tax rise. I want to know from you, do you back the farmers? Don't you back the farmers? Tell us whether you do, tell us whether you don't. Give us a call, 0344 499 1000, text on 87222. Get in touch on X at Talk TV. Calls are charged at the national rate. Text costs one standard network rate message. I'd love to hear from you, particularly if you've worked in farming, if you're in farming, if you're at the protest planning to go. I'd love to hear from you, why you think this is such a bad move. Maybe you're someone who thinks, well, I agree with Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor. We need to be taxing farms that are worth over £1 million because we need to pay for, vital public services. Tell me what you think. I'd love to hear from you. We're also, obviously, Rachel Reeves has said that she's not going to back down on this, saying we've got to fill the funding gap. Steve Reid, the Environment Secretary, has also said, we need to tax the wealthiest farms. National Farmers Union saying it's not the wealthiest farms, it's actually an awful lot of farms, 70% of them or so. Meanwhile, Downing Street has refused to say whether Rachel Reeves broke the ministerial code amid accusations that she lied about her CV, about her banking and experience as an economist. Plus, we're going to be talking about policing. It's been in the news quite a lot lately, hasn't it? The Home Secretary is announcing a major set of policing reforms today, promising a return to neighbourhood policing. Meanwhile, police diversity jobs, those absolutely crucial ones that really, really help us tackling crime, have arisen by almost a third in just 3 years, with almost £15 million of police budgets being spent on that since 2021. And how's that getting us places, eh? Anyway, we'll talk about all of that coming up. Welcome to the Home of Common Sense. Welcome again to Sam Armstrong. These farmers' protests... we spoke to a couple of farmers a little bit earlier. Nick Ellaby, we're going to go back to him in a moment. He's our Talk correspondent. He's live at the scene. There's no doubt at all there's an awful lot of support for farmers. Why do you think that is? Because I can remember the days of, the Countryside Alliance and the hunting protests and things. Not many townies came out for them then, but people are now.
Well, look, I do think Jeremy Clarkson has played a factor in this. I think people have begun to see the essential role that these people that get up out of bed at 4, 3, 5 o'clock in the morning and go to work doing difficult job to put food on our table.
Who'd get up at 4 in the morning and go to work?
Well, look,
it's horrible. Genuinely, and I wasn't doing it in the rain. I was doing it in an office.
In the depths of winter, in the freezing cold, come rain, come snow. Look, there's no days off for Christmas. The cows need feeding, the sheep need moving, all of that stuff. You have to do it.
You know all the farming terminology.
Well, look, I've been sent out to go de-ice the sheep's water troughs on a Christmas morning before now. I've done it before. I'll do it again. And look, it matters. And I'll tell you why it matters, Julia, because when you walk around the countryside, when you take a train through or drive through and you just see something beautiful, you see a network of hedges, you see green fields.
Oh, does it look lovely?
Doesn't it look lovely?
It's sort of Marie Antoinette-style farming.
Precisely. Let me tell you why those are there. That hedge is there because the grandfather of the person who is there now decided to plant it. He planted it and he did it right. He did the job right in a way that he was told how to do by his grandfather. That knowledge was passed down again and again and again. That is a beautiful way of running that unique landscape. It's the best way. It's a way that's been learned over literally a millennia.
And those are skills that you could read a book, but it's not the same as doing it and seeing it and doing it over the years and realising the nuances of the weather and
why do they do it? They do it because their grandfather taught it to them and their father relied on them to help them, and they want their
son... Quite a few women involved as well, by the way.
and they want their son or their daughter, and they want their grandson or their granddaughter to do the same.
Yeah.
And there is a common thread, a golden thread running through the history of the British countryside, which is that family link, family farms of people doing things, of planting trees under which they will never see the shadow, they will never rest on the hot day themselves, but they know those that come after them will do. And what this Labour government is doing is severing that golden thread.
Yep.
It will do permanent, irreparable damages. It will be the equivalent to Henry VIII's dissolution of the monasteries. It will be like the Poor Laws. It will break a chain that has gone on for centuries.
Elon Musk, who is putting his tuppence worth in on not just American politics but British politics, he's been siding with Alison Pearson, the Telegraph columnist we interviewed last week, obviously about her being questioned by the police over a supposed hate crime. But he's launched an attack on this government. He's criticised Keir Starmer before over basically imposing on our freedoms of speech. But he said that Britain is going full Stalin over this inheritance tax raid on farmers. This after the former editor of The Observer, Will Hutton, defended the policy of the tax rise, claiming it would cause the price of farmland to fall, allowing a younger generation to own land. Now,
it is Stalinesque.
But it is. This is the thing. This is obviously the 1930s. They had collectivisation. Basically, all the kulaks used to own the land, and of course they were all killed off in the revolution. And they basically had forced redistribution of farmland. Like, farmland's all in the hands of these people. But again, the very, very rich, there are some very wealthy aristocratic landowners. They're big, big houses, and we sort of, read about them in Jane Austen novels and things like that, And they own a load of land, and they'll be just fine. Their land is in trust. It's going to hand down to a generation. No one's paying inheritance tax. The very rich don't pay inheritance tax, just so you know. They don't pay it. And then that's all going to be handed down. And the big super-duper corporations, they'll be fine too. But, and yes, we do have a lot of people now who've got a load of money. They're buying up land, and they want to use it as a way of offsetting their inheritance tax, and there is a way of doing it. Now, you can have a system which means you don't allow those people to escape inheritance tax. Well, if most of your income ain't from your farming and you've only just bought the farm 4 years ago, yeah, I think we can find a way of getting round that you don't escape this tax. But the point is that the vast majority of farmers, according to the National Farmers Union, and again, Department for Energy, the Treasury, and the farmers union, no one could agree on how many farmers are actually impacted by this. And with the rate of inflation, land inflation especially, I guess more and more are. But it could be, up to 2/3 of land is affected. Now, given that 55% of our food in this country comes from farming in this country, we rely on the dairy farmers, on the cattle farmers, on the pig farmers, on the sheep farmers. We rely on the ones who grow our wheat, grow everything else. We would not survive without those farms. And if those farms go under because they have to sell their farmland, we're in a whole heap of slurry.
Yeah, well, look, let's go back to Stalin. What did Stalin do? He came in, he pretended that there were all these very wealthy people that were ripping off the ordinary worker who had all of this land. He unreasonably persecuted them. He pushed them off the land, and they repurposed that land over to other people, to their socialist enterprises. And where did it end?
Yeah.
The single greatest death of the Russian and Ukrainian people of all time, grotesque famine, people starving to death. Now, look, I'm not saying it's going to be that bad.
Of course
no,
not.
it's not. But it is going to end in the same way, which is a similar way, which is much, much less food being produced in this country, land going, frankly, to waste. There's no point restoring a great field that you're never going to see a return in not just this generation, but the next generation, but maybe you would in the generation after that if you're not going to be able to hold it. So we're going to be importing more. It's going to be produced to lower environmental standards. It's going to be worse for our economy. We're going to be sending more and more of our money overseas. Our balance of trade is going to go worse. And the economy is just going to continue to suffer. And it's just a pure policy of managed decline. It's honestly the thing that has most reminded me about the 1970s in this government.
Oh, yeah. Well, some of us are old enough to remember it. You mentioned Ukraine there, and Ukraine very much in the news. And again, I think what happened with the Russian invasion of Ukraine 1,000 days ago today, 1,000 days ago, we saw that immediate impact, not just on oil revenue, on oil prices and gas prices because of the sanctions as a result, but also on wheat prices, on fertiliser, which impacted everybody, sunflower, some of the basics of our agriculture, of our diet, and not just here in Europe, but also in Northern North Africa, in the Middle East. Huge number of countries reliant on what was always called the breadbasket of Europe, Ukraine, in terms of their production, not just the production, but the ability to get it out and ship it out of Ukraine. That had a massive impact on our food prices and everything we bought. Has that not taught us that we need to have not just secure, reliable, safe and affordable fuel and energy, but also food supplies? This is so basic. I mean, we've got this ramping up of the war in Ukraine at the time when Donald Trump says he could end it in a day. We'll see what happens after the inauguration on January the 20th. But in the last few days, we have seen Joe Biden say he's going to give permission for these long-range missiles to be fired. They're already within Ukraine, but to be fired from Ukraine into Russian territory, helping them to protect against Russian supply lines, but also to protect the territory they've grabbed around Kursk. We've also now, reports today suggesting some of those missiles may have been used. French and British missiles, the Storm Shadow, may well be being used as well. I would certainly expect that, would want that myself. But we had a threat back from Russia, from Vladimir Putin. He's signed a new law allowing him, in reaction to a long-range missile being fired into Russia, to use nuclear weapons. Now, there's a whole variety of nuclear weapons. We always think Hiroshima. That's not the only option. But he's talked about a tangible response from Russia. How scared should we be of Third World War?
Well, look, very scared, not only for the military reasons, but look, if this war escalates, and there is every chance that it could, we could see, if nuclear weapons are used in Ukraine, all of that grain that we basically rely on to feed half of the European continent disappears overnight. Yeah. Gas prices continue to go through the roof. And if that isn't a lesson, as you say, nothing ever will be. Look, I always look at the difference between the United States and us here in Europe here, right? The United States has not seen energy prices go through the roof. Why?
They've gone up a bit, but they've seen nothing like.
But what is the single biggest factor in that? They have their own domestic supply of gas, oil, energy, right? If you want to be secure in an increasingly dangerous world, you have to be energy independent, food independent, secure. And the progressive woke mind virus ideology, I apologise for putting it in those terms, doesn't get it. No. What do they want to do? They want to destroy the North Sea oil and gas industry so that we import all of our energy from dictators and despots like Saudi Arabia or Russia.
Well, Ed Miliband said he didn't want to do this, and it was terrible, but actually we get most of our fuel now. Our liquefied natural gas, which has replaced all of what was available otherwise from our own supplies, and some we did import from Europe, that's all coming from America. Well, lucky us that America is actually producing that oil and gas and is now the biggest supplier of both.
And what does he want to replace it with? Solar panels. Made where? Oh, yes, China.
It's genuinely painful. I don't know how anybody, we talk about this a lot on the show, but I don't know how anybody who is remotely paying attention, who knows, if you know 3 facts about how the world works and energy and food, you wouldn't support any of these policies. We are going to rue the day. This government is going to break us. I knew they'd be bad. I knew they would be bad. Your lot were rubbish. They were useless. They deserved to be booted out. I knew this lot were going to be bad, and I knew that it didn't matter how I voted. I knew that we were going to end up with a Labour government. I had no idea they would be this bad. They are so wrong about everything. Everything. It is paralysingly painful to sit and watch. But I wonder whether they don't really do facts, because it would appear. See what I did there? Rachel Reeves might have told a few porkies on her CV. I don't know. I didn't work with her at Halifax or Bank of Scotland. I didn't work with her at the Bank of England. I have no idea which did. I know I didn't play chess against her as a child prodigy playing. I'm not very good at chess, to be fair. Much better at drafts. Very good at poker, though. But it is extraordinary that so many things that we were told about her, child prodigy in chess, Bank of England economist for years, economist in HBOS. She has this amazing CV. So shouldn't we trust her as the Labour Chancellor? First woman, apparently. Apparently we're supposed to care about that as well. And big question marks about her CV, because people who were, basically senior to her saying that wasn't her job. She wasn't an economist. She was in admin. That she wasn't there for 10 years. She was there for 6 years. Things like that. She never won a child prodigy, child chess championship. She came sort of something like 29th. Very impressive, but nevertheless different from winning. These porcupines. I'm going to be careful. These claims about her have been around. Some of them she's propagated herself. Some of them she's happily had on her literature as standing as an MP, been pushed by her boss, the Prime Minister. It would appear that they're not true. Now, has she got the job under false pretences? Has she been elected under false pretences? Downing Street has refused to say whether Rachel Reeves broke the ministerial code. If Boris Johnson did this, and that is a man who lies 10 times before pouring a bowl of Kellogg's in the morning, if Boris Johnson would be hounded every day over this, and quite rightly, Rachel Reeves will just keep quiet about it. Doesn't matter.
Yeah, there's a profound lack of curiosity about this story from the mainstream media. It relied on Guido Fawkes, an online blog which we both love, but it's got 3 reporters to break this story, while the BBC, which employs hundreds, sat idly by. And it's bizarre, because this should be, and if it was the Tories, we would be seeing headline news day after day after day. And it matters. Why does it matter? Well, because this woman, in my view, has an honesty problem.
Yep.
Like, I don't frankly care too much about the fact that she started off lying about the fact that she won these chess competitions, or even about her CV. But what I do care about is when you solemn promise again and again and again and again to the British public that, look, trust us. I know we mucked it up last time, but trust us this time. It will be different. Look me in the eyes. I'll tell you, if you put us in, we're not going to put up the taxes on working people. And then within days starts unpicking that promise, breaking it, squeezing the British taxpayer to the pips.
Come on. Farmers aren't working people. Don't be silly. They don't do anything. They're
Farmers aren't working people. Pensioners aren't working people.
Well,
people who get the bus aren't working people. People who work in supermarkets aren't working people.
That's the thing. We've had retailers.
But Rachel Reeves, on a £170,000 salary, I'm a working person. Come on, Julia.
Thing, we've also had today, I mean, again, with these tax rises, there were going to be tax rises. We know the Tories would have put up taxes, everyone would put up taxes, and that is the problem. High street jobs losses are inevitable, prices are going to rise, shops are going to close, and jobs are going to be lost as a result of the tax rises, and the budget are hitting retail. We've had a warning, huge number of retailers, Tesco, Amazon, Greggs, Next, Aldi, Asda, Boots, Currys, Lidl, Marks and Sparks, Primark, Sainsbury's. They have a charity shop group, the British Heart Foundation, the Associated Independent Stores representing independent traders. All of them have signed this letter basically saying, look, you've put up national minimum wage. OK, we want people to be able to have a decent wage and everything, but at the same time as putting up national insurance for employers on every job, and huge energy cost increases, and a bunch of other taxes going up. They simply cannot afford to make ends meet. They're going to be cutting jobs, cutting back, and our prices are going to go up. And again, we're going to have that spiral of inflation. So even if people's wages do go up, but, train drivers or doctors or anyone else, your wages go up. But if prices go up by the same amount, you haven't had a pay rise, you've stuck the same.
Yeah, and look, by the way, they're also changing the law to make it impossible for employers to sack new employees that you hire and then they turn out they're rubbish within the first few months. And the result is going to be this, right? Which is, if you're a major employer, you're simply not going to take staff on as staff. What you're going to do is you're going to say, come on as a freelance contractor, you're on a precarious contract, I just can't take the risk as an employer. And what you're going to see is workers actually end up with a worse deal than they would have done if the government had stuck to reasonable regulation in the first place. And this is time and time again what Labour governments do, right? They don't get how business works, they don't understand it, they frankly don't like it, and so they muck around with it to progress some strange left-wing ideal, and what do? They end up making everything worse.
Well, you've got to remember, this is a Chancellor. She doesn't even know where she worked, what her job was and how long she was there. So I don't know how she's able to work around everyone else's jobs. But 11:21 is the time. We're going to take a quick break. I want to hear from you. Give us a call, 0344 499 1000. Thousands of farmers are protesting the new family farm inheritance tax at Westminster today. Do you back them? Do you not? Jeremy Clarkson is there. We'll talk to our reporter and others on the scene coming up again. And tell us what you think. 0344 499 1000. This is Talk, the home of common sense.
Bloomberg UK reporting Ukraine has made the first long-range missile strike inside of Russia. These are the missiles that Biden has approved for the use by Ukraine. It appears that Ukrainian defense forces struck a military facility on Russian territory. Earlier today, the Kremlin issued a threat to say that if Ukraine did strike any facilities in Russia, that would produce a nuclear response, their words, against Ukraine, presumably.
The UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the home of common sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Lots and lots of calls and messages coming in about the farmers. Let's go straight to the phone lines. Alan is in Norfolk, and Alan, you wanted to have your say on the farmers' protest. Do you support them?
Absolutely, Julia. I think the current government seems to view farming as some sort of quaint Edwardian gentrified business rather than hard-working farmers that are there. I think their impression of it is from the earliest 20th century. One thing I wanted to say, though, I live in a very rural community. Yeah. I'm not a farmer myself, but thousands of businesses, pubs, restaurants, delis, farm shops, butchers, bakers, rely on local produce up here, and they're actually very proud to promote it. And if that all goes, surely then the only alternative is to import food, substandard food. And I'm wondering how, not only is that a disaster for farming in this country, and it begs the question what actually then happens to the land. Yeah. Also, how does this sit with the government's credentials on climate? Because if we're importing loads of food that we could be growing ourselves, that is increasing our carbon footprint.
No, this is the madness of their net zero targets. Tories just as bad, Lib Dems, Greens all signed up to this madness, is that anything that's produced, even if, say, like it's a wind turbine, it is produced in a coal-fired factory in China or grown in, conditions that involve, very energy-dependent conditions abroad. And it's shipped by an oil tanker or flown into the country. It doesn't count until the moment it gets to our country, because that's how insane that net zero target is.
Yeah, and the other point I wanted to raise was, based on that as well, the whole climate issue and so on. There was a recent study, and I don't really know how much traction it got in the media, very little from what I can see, apart from shows like yourself and GB News, was that the Oxfam audited the World Bank, and over a period of about 5 years, the World Bank runs a portfolio for climate-related projects, and money is taken from Western governments, and apparently up to $50 billion has gone missing. They don't know where it is. They can't account for it. They don't know who it's been given to, and there's even rumours it could be given to nefarious organisations.
No, this stuff is always pilfered away. Every one of these major organisations, whether it's the EU, World Health Organisation or UN, whoever it is, money just disappears, billions and billions, all completely unaccounted for. Remember, one of the reasons I wanted to vote for Brexit was because...
to stop it.
Well, no, because the EU counts had not passed an audit for, I think, 15 years. Very good point, Sam, I really appreciate that. Again, Sam Armstrong just saying a bit earlier that more than half of the food we eat in this country comes from this country. And, look, I'm someone who does expect to be able to buy my blueberries any time of the year, and sometimes they're from Chile and sometimes they're from Bulgaria or wherever they're from. But a lot of the time our food is actually from the UK. And a lot of the stuff that we basically live on, the staples of our diet, funnily enough, are the things that we can easily grow and produce here, which is why they're staples of our diet, which is why, for instance, we don't normally rely on rice. People eat bread in this country. Every country has their local food stuff, which is reliant on local production. And our normal diet, I know we're quite cosmopolitan now, and we have our curries and our Chinese and our pizzas and our whatever, but actually a lot of our basic foodstuffs totally rely on British farmers, a lot of whom are not big multinational conglomerates. They are, you know, one or two families.
Yeah, and I actually feel very, very strongly about this. We're not just random human beings that just appear nowhere and that could be just as happy in living in Paris or in Beirut or in London. You know, no, we are the product and the produce of thousands of years of cultural development, yes, as a British nation with a unique set of climate and foods and cultures. We are English, we are British, we're proud, and that means that we are tied to the land, right? We have a total link and connection with these things that we know make us English.
I think
British.
this is the divide, isn't it, between the somewheres and the anywheres, and that's the big issue. Again, that was an issue with Brexit. It's an issue, again, Donald Trump as well. But it's this idea, this sort of middle-class, urban, metropolitan elite who just sort of think, no borders. You want international organisations to run everything because ghastly people from their own country vote the wrong way. And it's this idea they don't feel tied to the country. It's fascinating.
Import your food, import your people, import your ideas.
Your culture. Yeah. Maybe that is why people are feeling so they can feel there's something in your gut. You just know that this policy is wrong, isn't it? Let's talk to Jean. She's in Hertfordshire. Hello, Jean.
Hello, good morning, Julia. Very pleased to speak to you.
Lovely to speak to you. What's your view on the farmers' protests?
I absolutely support them, and I'm very sad that they have to stoop to, have to put themselves out to go all through this for a decent reason. The thing that no one seems to be pointing out at the moment, we've got an example over in Spain at the moment where it's flooded, and I've heard that they won't be able to supply people because they've lost their crops.
Yeah.
And if we need an example of how the security needs to be looked at, and it's not, it's not in the far, it's happening.
Yeah.
And we've got to see what happens.
We've had that, you say we have that all the time. We say, the X has gone up in price because there's been a drought or there's been flooding in Spain or something. And it impacts. And again, we saw, didn't we, from Jeremy Clarkson's TV series, just the impact of just, a few weeks of bad weather at the crucial moment and how much that can impact things. Is it important to you that these protests remain legal and civil and within the law and not sort of going down the Just Stop Oily Extinction Rebellion?
Even when they are civil, the press, I noticed with one of the, the big one where they all came to London, and there was no problems whatsoever. Yeah. And when the press reported it, there was another demo going on, and they said there were 4 arrests. And it was nothing to do with people. So
I've had that with anti-lockdown protests that I've attended, and there'll be some other sort of, frankly, a rabble doing a separate protest, and then they're all linked up together. Exactly. But they're never bothered by certain other protests, are they?
It's so choreographed, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely, Jean. So they've got your support. Thank you, Jean. Let's go to Jake. He's in Staffordshire. Jake, good morning to you.
Good morning, you all right?
Very well indeed. Now, my in-laws are in Staffordshire. They've got quite a lot of snow. Have you got snow on the ground there?
Yeah, we certainly do.
Yeah, we just got we just got grey skies and a bit of sleety rain down here in London. We don't do proper weather like you do in Staffordshire. Tell us what your thoughts are on the farmers.
Well, I work for a small haulage firm with 10 trucks, and we deliver solely animal feed to farms.
Okay, yeah.
Whether it be livestock farms or dairy farms. So what people, the government especially, don't realise is it's not just the farmers who they're going to affect.
Yeah.
It's people like us.
Yeah.
Because it's a domino effect, If the farms go, the feed companies are going to have less customers. They're going to then start taking work off the small haulage firms. This haulage firm's been going for... It's been passed on to generations like farms do.
Yeah.
And it's people like our haulage companies that are going to go as well.
Yeah. I mean, Alan, just call a couple of before you making that point, their local businesses, the butchers, they want their local produce, but also it produces jobs. It's funny, isn't it? Because governments are always very upset, if a car plant goes down or there's, a steel plant, and there'll be a lot of focus because there are, say, 3,000 or 5,000 jobs, and they know that will have a massive impact on the local community because those jobs kind of help fund a lot of other jobs. But when it's farmers, they just kind of shrug and go, yeah, not really a problem.
And seeing it from myself, I mean, sorry, obviously as a lorry driver, we do unholy hours that people wouldn't even realise, you know, and people don't see that some of the stuff that we have to deal with. But going to dairy farms, going to cattle farms, going to all these farms that I go to, I stand and speak to these farmers who are the nicest, most down-to-earth people in the world. You know, I'll go there, they make you a cup of tea, you stand there, you have a chat with them while you're delivering the product that you're there, and I've heard firsthand how worried and stressed that these families are.
But apparently they're just making it up in their heads because the Treasury and the Jeffrey insist it's not happening.
It's an absolute farce, and when you see it firsthand, I go home and I speak to my partner who's heavily pregnant and obviously well worried about what our future's going to look like because of this. You know, I'm the breadwinner in our house, which is absolutely, you know, nothing more that I like. But I'm going home stressed and anxious because I'm worried about my job.
Yeah.
Obviously, I then see the effect it has on the farmers, and it's just, you know, it's just absolute. It's just ridiculous.
Yeah.
So why this is even a thing?
And it's not even going to raise much money. I think even the best sum of money they think they could raise from this would pay for the NHS for half a day or something. It's ridiculous. Jake, good luck in the snow, and longer term, good luck with the baby. I hope everything goes well and safely for you and your family. Thank you very much indeed for that. Sam Armstrong, just briefly before we go to a break, it is fascinating, the sport. Now, those were rural callers, I think. It'd be lovely to hear from some fellow townies like myself, or what you thought support this, because I think it was Jean who used the phrase, or no, it was Jake, about people being down to earth. But that's kind of literally what farmers are. They're down to earth. They actually understand the stuff which us people living in concrete don't really get about how stuff works, because we just see the stuff. We want to buy some food. We call up, we go onto an app, or we go to the supermarket and it's on the shelves, and that's kind of all we need to know about it. And there is a heck of a lot that goes on before that point.
Yeah, it just don't work like that in the countryside. Let me tell you, like, you can't just be too lazy to go to the shop and order it in and it turns up in 15 minutes, right? If you want something done, you have to go do it. And things take time.
And do it over a period of years.
You grow a crop one year and you improve it over many years. These things happen over not just a lifetime, but generations.
Yeah.
And if you don't get that, that's why you pass ludicrous tax rises like a policy that's going to break it every single generation.
Well, as I was saying, Rachel Reeves probably doesn't understand other people's jobs because she doesn't even know what other jobs she's actually had herself, how long she worked somewhere, and what her qualifications are. She doesn't even know whether she did or did not win a chess championship as a child. We're going to talk about all that up next with Henry Hill from Conservative Home. This is Talk.
your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense. Thank you so much for joining me. Still with me is Sam Armstrong, and we'll get more of his thoughts and also get to more of your calls coming in thick and fast about the thousands of farmers protesting the new family farm inheritance tax at Westminster today. Jeremy Clarkson arrived a best part of an hour ago. I want to know, do you back them? Tell us why you do. Tell us why you don't. Love to hear a call from you if you don't back their protest. You think they should face that tax. Haven't had one of those yet. Please do get in touch. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. In the meantime, we were just saying, weren't we, Sam, that can understand why Rachel Reeves wouldn't really understand a farming job. She doesn't even understand the job she's done. Not really sure where she worked, what job she did, how long she did it, or even whether she actually won a chess championship. So much so that she actually apparently edited her own LinkedIn profile. That's that awful businessy website. I have to say, I went on it once and I've just never gone on it again last week to remove her previous claim that she worked as an economist at the Bank of Scotland between 2006 and 2009. The site was updated to state her role was in retail banking at Halifax. Some question marks also about how long she spent working at the Bank of England as well. Well, let's talk about this with Henry Hill. He's deputy editor of Conservative Home. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Now, some of us might think that, you know, whether it was, I don't know, someone working on the tills in a burger takeaway or someone, I don't know, actually controlling the purse strings of the nation, that their honesty should not be in question when they tell you things, that they're telling you the truth. But there are some big question marks now being raised about Rachel Reeves' CV, and Number 10 has refused to say whether she broke the ministerial code or not. Tell us exactly. I mean, there are a whole number of different things that have been claimed along the lines, whether it's in documents, given to constituents when she was running as an MP or put out in speeches and documents by the Labour Party, and obviously her LinkedIn page as well. Tell us what the queries are and what are the question marks.
So there's sort of two at the opposite ends of the spectrum in terms of seriousness, and as you say, there's a laundry list in the middle. And I confess that unless I was here reading about to you from a scroll, I couldn't give you them all. The first one, which you alluded to, was the champion chess one, right? Where she was saying, "Oh yeah, I'm a champion chess player." Actually, what that meant was she was in a championship tournament. And then at the other end, she came
29th. Everyone thought she'd won. She was a chess prodigy. She'd won the championship. She actually came 29th, I think.
Well, it's really good to know that my school sports days were actually glorious triumphs. So I think I managed to come 29th, and there weren't even that many races. But the big one, as you say, is there was the idea that she worked as an economist at the Bank of Scotland. Obviously, that was HBOS at the time, and then it emerged. Actually, maybe she wasn't. Maybe she was working in retail banking, and then it emerged that actually what she was in, I think she was in a kind of administration and complaints department within Halifax, which is a perfectly fine work, of course, but that's not being an economist at the Bank of Scotland. And you know, you've presumably read CVs from people sometimes when they take a 6-month internship and they're saying that they mastered 100 competencies and all the rest of it. I'm sure at some point or other we've all done this, and then eventually you forget to update your LinkedIn because, as you say, it's a soul-crushing website. Why would you go on it? But it is a real challenge for Labour in a sense, because what is it, a breach of the ministerial code? Probably. I mean, I think there's a slight danger there in that all kinds of things are breaches of the ministerial code. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's a resigning
But the key thing here is it's not just what she did at HBOS, at Halifax Bank of Scotland, as it was then. It's also about how long she spent working at the Bank of England. Now, one of the things about your CV is very clear on, you choose CV, you have to state when you started and when you left somewhere. Your reference will state when you started, when you left somewhere. I know how long and what years I worked at various different newspapers or radio stations, because you remember things like that. You know, I left there then, I left there. You know, you might go, oh God, when was I promoted from that to that, and have to look that up. But the idea that, you know, that you don't remember how long you worked at the Bank of England or what your job was at the Halifax Bank of Scotland, I mean, I think that's very strange. I know exactly what all of my jobs were everywhere I worked, and I think it's very, very, very weird. Unless, you know, it's a deliberate telling of an untruth to make her CV look better. But we've particularly also had the Prime Minister. He's been going on stage, doing an interview again and again, saying we're going to have Rachel Reeves. Apparently it's terribly exciting that she's the first woman Chancellor. I try to care about these things but fail, as does most of the country. But the crucial thing is she's an economist. She worked at the Bank of England. She knows this stuff. You can trust her with the nation's finances. But if we can't trust her to, because her background isn't quite what she says it is, and we can't trust her to tell the truth about her own jobs, how on earth can she be Chancellor?
I mean, the reference point is actually a really good one because, of course, you're right. If you're applying to another job that's going to check your references, they'll be like, OK, so Rachel, she says she works between these dates and these dates. And if your reference comes back and says, no,
she was here for a week.
Going to be interested. Right. So it suggests that presumably this was maybe a politics thing when maybe they were being slightly less rigorous. It does raise questions for the Chancellor. And it's particularly problematic because Labour went so hard on the ministerial code and questions of probity when they were in opposition. Rachel Reeves, in particular, there is a clip which I'm sure your researchers can dig up of her in the House of Commons saying, the ministerial code is one of the most fundamental things. No one would never break it. And yet here we are. 6 months into Labour being in office, we have the Chancellor accused of misleading people over her CV. A few weeks ago, we had David Lammy, the Foreign Secretary, stood up and said in the House of Commons, I have consulted the Chagossians about the Indian Ocean deal every step of the way. And the very same day, the Chagossians came out and said he hasn't spoken to us about it.
But
once,
again, that used to be a resigning offence if you lied in the Commons. Right. But this is it. If Boris Johnson lied about his CV, and Boris Johnson lies, I say, 10 times before breakfast, they would be all over this. A lot of the papers would be all over this. Everyone seems to be remarkably sort of calm and sanguine about the idea that the Chancellor of the Exchequer, who lied, as Sam Armstrong's been pointing out all morning, lied repeatedly about she wouldn't put up taxes on working people, including national insurance. Paul Johnson from the Institute of Fiscal Studies is very clear. You said you weren't going to put up a national insurance rate. Well, you did. You put it up on employers, but that's still putting it up. She's lied in terms of policy, but it now appears that we are questioning her honesty in terms of her own background and her own qualifications for the job of Chancellor. I don't understand why that wouldn't be a breach of the ministerial code.
I mean, it almost certainly is. The problem with the ministerial code is it is quite vague, and it is up to the Prime Minister to decide how to enforce it. Now, she hasn't lied to the and that's probably proper. We don't want officials deciding who is or is not in the cabinet. That means ultimately it goes back to Sir Keir Starmer.
Well, he's the son of a toolmaker, so I mean he would never ever gloss over things in his background.
The toolmaker owned the factory, but I think the interesting thing is his spokesperson has really been evasive on this. So people have been asking, has Rachel Reeves lied about her CV? And the Prime Minister's response, the spokesman's response has been, well, the Prime Minister is clear that she has stabilised the economy. And it was like, well, that wasn't what we asked you. So he's not going. He clearly doesn't feel able to go out and man the trenches for Rachel Reeves, which is a really bad sign.
Very, very telling. Well, we'll keep posted on this one. Henry Hill, Deputy Editor of Conservative Home, thank you so much for joining us. 11:47 is the time. Really quick, yes or no, Sam Armstrong, do you think Rachel Reeves is going to have to resign over this or not, or be sacked?
No.
No, I don't think they haven't gone over anything yet. It's very early. 5 months in.
Not big on honesty, this lot.
No, there is that. I mean, Frankie, your lot quite a lot to answer on that front. I genuinely worry about the degradation of integrity in our politics. I think it's a very, very, very big issue. Love to hear your thoughts on that. Keep your calls coming in on the farmers. Do you back them? Don't you back them with those protests? Up next, we are going to take a quick break. Then we are going to be talking about the police. Not only are we going to be seeing a sort of a new announcement on the police from Yvette Cooper, the Home Secretary, and police, sort of IT and forensic systems and bringing back neighbourhood policing. Be nice to see that again. We've also got more spending on, guess what? Diversity jobs. Of course we have. That's up next. This is Talk, the home of common sense.
Bloomberg UK reporting Ukraine has made the first long-range missile strike inside of Russia. These are the missiles that Biden has approved for the use by Ukraine. It appears that Ukrainian defense forces struck a military facility on Russian territory. Earlier today, the Kremlin issued a threat to say that if Ukraine did strike any facilities in Russia, that would produce a nuclear response, their words, against Ukraine, presumably.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense. 11:52 is the time. Let's talk policing. Talked about it a lot lately, but perhaps in a different context. Let's speak to Mike Neville. He's a former Metropolitan Police Detective Chief Inspector. Good morning to you.
Good morning, Julia, from a snowy Staffordshire.
Oh, we've been hearing all about stuff. I say my in-laws are there. That is, yes, I can see it. I was definitely looking. So, well, thank you for standing outside. I hope we're not going to get you too cold. Though I think you look like you're a robust man. You can handle it. Lots to talk about on the policing front. First of all, we've got the Home Secretary, Vic Cooper, right now, I think this morning. No one's paying attention to it, to be fair. She is saying that she's announcing an extra £500 million for neighbourhood policing. She says a fundamental reset in the relationship between the public and the police, bringing back trust. But she also is talking about sort of trying to bring all the police forces together. I think there's 43 different police forces. She wants to have some looking at centralised IT, centralised forensic labs, having a little bit more of coherent, joined-up thinking. Would you welcome that?
Well, I suppose it looks like common sense, doesn't it? If you look at the police forces as they developed, there was about 200 until the 60s and 70s. Now you've got 43, but there's a lot of waste, buying different uniforms and cars and things like that. But then you look at the experience of Police Scotland, and that's not gone very well at all. All the different police forces in Scotland were joined together. And what people fear, of course, is if you're in, say, Cheshire, and you get joined up with Merseyside and Manchester, all the resources will be drained away to deal with problems in central Manchester.
Because the focus is going to be on a Saturday night in Manchester rather than rural crime in Cheshire. Yeah.
And neighbourhood policing. I was a beat bobby in right near the Oval Cricket Ground, a really rough area of Clapham and Stotwell. But they try and make it all too complicated in the sense that I was ruthless with criminals. I had fights with drug dealers. I had a wall dedicated to my name saying I was all sorts of wicked things. But I also run a local youth group as well, so I was sort of trusted. So, when I arrested the, armed robber's daughter, when I arrested the armed robber, he was, there's no fights because he knew I was a decent chap. Yeah. So they try and make this community policing really complicated. But what you had is I used to live in Lambeth then. Most of the officers who police Lambeth will not live anywhere near there. Yeah. And it's almost like an army of occupation. So I had some skin in the game. I ran a local youth group. I lived there.
But also that local knowledge and people recognising and going, oh, yeah, by the way, Mike, there's been a problem with, them at number 54. And just getting an idea and seeing, having a feel for a neighbourhood. I mean, certainly you don't see any of that now. I wonder if that's because everyone's focusing on the wrong things, like sort of non-crime hate incidents. We've seen that incident with Alison Pearson. They're now saying it's a criminal incident. Policing Minister has said that Dame Diana Johnson, that police should note online hostility in case it escalates into criminality, but guidelines for non-crime hate incidents need to be made clearer. She's talking about how important freedom of speech is, but we've got this ongoing issue with Essex Police investigating journalists for a tweet that she actually deleted within 2 hours, and yet we've got burglaries unsolved. We've got But, bag thefts, bike thefts, rapes, you name it, shoplifting galore, nothing being prosecuted. And yet the police spend time on that stuff. Have they got their priorities right? And especially when they're spending, I think, is it 15 million quid in the last few years on roles for diversity, equality, diversity and inclusion roles in UK forces. And it's gone up by almost a third in 3 years.
Well, it's absolute nonsense, isn't it? I saw one of the biggest spenders, of course, was Devon and Cornwall police. Well, Cornwall, according to my stats, is 97% white. I think less than 1% of people identify as black or Asian in Cornwall. So what in God's name are Devon and Cornwall doing for that? And one of the biggest proponents of this is the Nottinghamshire Chief Constable, and she keeps banging on about diversity, but her force is one of the 3 in special measures because it's utterly failing. And I think, Julie, you know as well as I do that if you're white or black, gay or straight or whatever you are, all you want is a simple service from the police. Yeah. You want to feel safe on the street. Yeah. You want to feel safe in your home. If something happens, you want an opportunity that the criminals may be caught. At the moment, most people only report a burglary because they want a crime number. They only report it if they're insured. So if you're poor, you haven't got insurance, you don't report. The only thing you expect from the police is a crime number. Yeah. In times past, you might expect that the police might arrest the burglar and may get your things back. But you and your mad ideas.
Hey, listen, Mike, I'm 5.5 months since my bag was stolen. I provided CCTV footage of the guy and of the actual act of it being stolen. They've identified him. He was in prison, I believe out of prison now. Still haven't decided whether they're not going to even hand the file to the CPS and whether the CPS is going to press charges. 5.5 months on, got his identity, got video of the actual crime taking place. I mean, I don't know how much more I can do other than actually going round and feeling his collar myself.
Well, it's truly shocking, isn't it? And
no, it's not. It's not shocking anymore. That's the awful thing.
That's the problem, isn't it? So, I mean, to build trust and confidence, the police have got to go back to basics. Stop the nonsense. Yep. Stop recruiting. No one cares. No one's ever said to me, the officer who came to help me, I didn't like the colour of their skin or their sex or their sexuality. What they say is, I got a rubbish service. No one did it. My expertise, like you just mentioned there, is CCTV, catching criminals with images. I go to these different police forces. They're identifying 7, 8, 9%. One police force are identifying 18% of criminals who capture on CCTV. And another guy said, oh, that's quite good. I said, no, it's rubbish. Yeah. It means 82% of people who are captured on CCTV are not identified. Yeah. So the low expectation is absolutely terrible. And people have just lost faith in the police. And that impacts on trust and confidence. And we need to do better. I offer my services. I don't come in here just to moan. I will come and help you catch some more criminals if that's what you want to do. I'll
introduce you to my local PC who's dealing with my case file. But there we are. Mike Neville, always good to talk to you. Get back in the warmth now. Former Met Police DCI. Sam Armstrong?
I just despair. Do you know what you said it right just at the start. When he was a police officer in Southwark, he lived in Southwark. Yeah. He was a local bobby. People knew who he was.
Knew the area.
He knew who the crooks were. He could deal with it. Instead, we've done into these hyper-professionalised, centralised services. Everyone's knows anything. No one does anything. They're all too busy climbing the greasy pole.
And also, and again, if you want to climb the greasy pole, you do have to pretend at least, or actually have certain political views, and you want to be doing your rainbow lanyards and all of that and the Stonewall stuff. Genuinely, you're not getting ahead at all. You're not going to become a police chief unless you've signed up to all of that stuff. Loads more to talk about. Do get your calls in if you want to talk about that. Lots of calls coming in about the farmers' protest. Do support them. Up next, we'll talk to yet another farmer and actually an agri-tech entrepreneur, James Wright. This is Talk. We are the home of common sense.
UK. On DAB+. On your smart speaker. On your smart TV. And on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon to you. This is Talk, the home of common sense. Welcome back to the show. Very much appreciate you joining us on this absolutely miserable, cold, wet and drizzly day here in London. We've got these farmers' protests taking place. Many of them come from further afield, Midlands and the North, where I know there's a lot of snow about. I hope you're keeping warm. Hope we can keep you company and keep you cosy throughout the day. Obviously, Ian Collins coming up in an hour. I'm with you, of course, on DAB Plus Radio. You can listen on DAB Plus or on your smart speaker. You can watch on YouTube or you can watch on your connected device. But either way, it's great to have you on board. Fabulous also to be joined by commentator Sam Armstrong. Good tuppence worth on everything, as we always enjoy. Great to have you back on the show. We're going to be talking more about these farmers' protests. Thousands of farmers have descended on Westminster today to protest the government's plan to impose that 20% inheritance tax on family farms. Chancellor Rachel Reeves has refused to back down. She says that difficult decisions have to be taken in order to fill funding gaps. I need to fund the NHS, need to fund schools, she says. Steve Reid, the Environment Secretary, has said similar. But, of course, a lot of farmers feel rather differently. We'll talk to another one of those in just a couple of moments. Also, Ukraine is marking the 1,000th day since Vladimir Putin ordered his troops to invade Ukraine back in February 2022. So much for his 10-day special military operation, guys. But Russia has vowed an appropriate and tangible response, possibly even a nuclear response, if the US uses long-range missiles. Well, US missiles are fired by Ukraine into Russian territory. It's believed, according to some reports, that may have already happened since Biden gave permission. Plus, we're going to talk about BA. Thousands of British Airways passengers once again facing lengthy delays after yet another major IT glitch hit the company's software on Monday, causing travel chaos around Europe. But why does it keep happening? Was an engineer at home, working from home yet again without his passport working? We'll talk about all of that coming up. This is Talk, as I say, the home of common sense, with Sam Armstrong. Sam, farmers' protests, I mean, really getting going. Thousands of people there in Westminster. There are kind of two protests at the same time, aren't there? There are 1,800 National Farmers Union members who are meeting with their MPs, representatives. They booked rooms in halls around Westminster, not just in Westminster itself. Then there's been this demonstration outside Whitehall, organised by another group. All peaceful, some tractors on the roads, although there's been a real sort of push for, got to stay legal, got to stay civil, don't disrupt the public too much, don't want to go down the Extinction Rebellion, Just Stop Oil route where, frankly, the public's went, no, we're not going to give you our support. But there is an incredible amount of support from the public for the farmers, isn't there? Are you surprised by that?
No, I'm not surprised. Look, farmers are the very, very best of our country. When we look and think of what it means to be English and British, many of us will cast our mind over to the scenes of the countryside, which is, as I say, not just a playground. It is the product of generations of work by dedicated people that get up early, go to work to maintain that landscape, to provide food for us. And look, this Labour government has chosen to pick on the very, very worst people. And we should be clear, they're making choices. They chose to give bumper £10,000 pay rises to train drivers. Why? Because they're mates with the unions that pay to the Labour Party to publish posters and do all the things it wants to do. They're paymasters. They have chosen to spend £10 billion on Ed Miliband's fantasy energy project, which won't produce any energy. They are making choices, and the choices they have made is to fund their woke projects. And how are they funding it? They've taken the winter fuel payment away from vulnerable pensioners on as little as £13,000. They're hitting farmers in the pocket, and they're making it impossible to employ people that do jobs like work in supermarkets, and they're hitting people who are getting the bus. They're doubling the price of a bus fare, right?
And again, everyone always gets... Middle classes, the media, talk so much about trains. Vast majority of people in this country don't get a train to work, don't get a train on holiday, don't get a train anywhere from one year to the next, but they use buses.
Yeah, this is a full-throated, unbelievably dedicated, hard-pressed assault on working people. And why? Well, they don't know where they've worked. They don't know what a working person is. This is a government that would have said anything anything to get into
Anything.
office, and now we're seeing the mask slip. And what is it? It's just like it was in Wales. They don't like working people. They don't like rural people. They're a pretty urban, pretty metropolitan, pretty well-educated party
and
that like people like
frankly, they go to Waitrose and the blueberries and the kale is on the shelves, and they really don't care how they've got there. And they're completely out of touch. I think that's the issue. Well, look, let's talk to someone who absolutely does understand about the life of a farmer. Let's talk to James Wright. He's on the line, joining us now from the protest in Westminster. He's a farmer, an agri-tech entrepreneur. Good afternoon to you, James.
Good afternoon.
Thank you very much indeed for joining us. I know you've, for people watching, it looks like it's not so much of a big protest. You've kind of slipped away so we can get a signal and actually hear you, and very much appreciate that. Now, an awful lot, thousands of farmers have descended on Westminster today to make that protest. Just explain to us, for a lot of people, and I keep asking my guests this because I think it's important to come from your own words, why you think that the government imposing for the first time a 20% inheritance tax on family farms worth more than £1 million, because there'll still be a lot of people, and I see this all the time online, people and politicians saying, £1 million, you own a £1 million farm, you're rich, it's only a 20% tax, it's going to affect very, very few farmers. Why are you so, and your colleagues, so unhappy about it?
Well, look, I'm a tenant, so I rent my farm. I also own part of it. It's above the threshold, so we will have to pay the tax. And in my lifetime, we won't generate enough income to pay it. So although farmers, you know, we don't want to be treated differently, the simple matter of the fact is that farming is not profitable enough to be able to pay it. That Labour have got their sums wrong.
That's a wonderful bit of timing from that that truck bell there, horn there. And this is the thing, a lot of people were looking at sort of, you know, gentlemen farmers, these aristocrats, their big houses, and people looking at the land and saying, well, there you are then, you've got all this land. But as you say, tenants, they may, I would say farmers may have land, but actually they'd have to sell it in order to pay that inheritance tax if they wanted to hand it down to their family. Have you been in farming for generations? Because many of the farmers were talking about people who've got, you know, 300 years on the same piece of farmland.
So I'm a first-generation farmer. Yeah. I bought 2 pigs for my student loan 10 years ago. And we bought our first bit of farmland in April, having rented it for the last sort of 10 years. And you would think someone like me would be all for breaking up sort of the people who've owned land for generations. But no, it's bad for the countryside. It's devastating for rural communities. My children go to a very small rural school. All of the children in the school are either farmers or work for farmers, the sons and daughters of. The moment you start losing that critical mass in the rural community, you don't just lose the farms, you also lose the schools, the post offices and the pubs. And this is devastating. It cannot be understated.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing, actually, how many of our callers who live in rural areas have said that they're in haulage or the local shops and how much life is integrated. Do you think that a lot of this is a sort of a town v country kind of argument where, as Sam Armstrong was just saying, you know, you've got a lot of people in government and in the civil service and the Treasury and MPs, they just have no understanding, as frankly people like me don't, no understanding of how the countryside works, how food actually gets onto our shelves, hence that, I mean, brilliant, you know, slogan, you know, farmers, no food. It doesn't just appear in the cellophane out of nowhere. Someone actually had to produce it and till the land and tend the animals and produce it and take it to market. It's a really long, very, very hard process to us just picking something off the supermarket shelves. Do you think there's just a complete lack of understanding in our modern world for millions of us about how our food gets to us?
Yeah, I mean, I don't pretend to know how things work in London. I wouldn't tell somebody how to sort of improve the tubes. And simple fact of the matter is London-based politicians like Steve Reed shouldn't be coming to the countryside and telling us how to live our lives. They don't understand the complexities involved in farming. They don't understand the amount of capital that's tied up. They'd be far better off letting the current system lie. And it only generates £520 million a year, 0.04% of government funding. They'd be much better off looking at raising money elsewhere or cutting spending. And what they will do is devastate rural communities. communities that Labour simply just do not understand.
Although a lot of Labour MPs will want them to understand it, because we understand some 100 Labour MPs now, the newly elected bunch from July, actually have large, rural constituencies. These were always traditionally the Tory shires, sometimes Liberal Democrat, but now Labour seizing a lot of those with a split vote. They're going to perhaps having to pay lots of attention, and an awful lot of the protesters today are actually meeting with those MPs, trying to explain what the issue is. Do you get any sense at all that the MPs, that the ministers, that the Chancellor or the Prime Minister are listening?
Well, I mean, clearly not, because we've been very clear over the last couple of weeks that the damage this is going to do not only to family farms but also the nation's food security. I think if you're a newly elected Labour MP, you were elected under a false promise. Keir Starmer promised last year not to repeal agricultural property relief, and he's done exactly that. Yeah. So, yeah, I think you would be feeling pretty sheepish if you're a Labour MP meeting literally a few hundred metres away from where we are right now.
I mean, if the government says that we need to raise taxes, people with the broadest shoulders, there are ways of doing that which wouldn't necessarily affect as many farmers. I mean, for instance, not raising the amount that a farmer would have to be worth, by a considerable amount, so it didn't hit most farmers. Perhaps tackling, and this would be unfair for you, I realise, but farmers who are new to the job, who are not, not farmers who've handed it down through generations. Some of the rather rich folk who've decided to buy up farming land as a bit of a hobby or as a way of avoiding inheritance tax. They could easily have put in loopholes and things to tackle those people without impacting the vast majority of people who actually produce the food that we eat, couldn't they?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. There are ways. I mean, look, the clear message today is you turn on the tax, take it away. We don't need it. It's bad for the nation's food security. But if they are going to keep it, they can change it. They could treat it like a rollover relief. So if you passed your farm between generations, but you never sold it, you'd never actually pay the tax. If Labour wanted to do this and protect family farms, they could. But it's not about raising money. This is about a war on the countryside and them taking control, taking back that land that's been farmed by farmers up and down the country for generations. They simply aren't listening.
Do you think there's any chance they're going to change their minds?
Well, I think today's the day to do it. There are thousands of farmers standing around me now. If they're going to make the change, they need to soon, because this won't be the end of it. This is the peaceful day where we're all coming to share our views. But farmers will not be cowed by a Labour government that's based in London.
Well, we shall wait and see. I know you've got an awful lot of backing from our audience and certainly from people like me as well. James Wright, farmer, Agri-tech entrepreneur, thank you for talking to us. There's not quite a lot of noise background because he's just moved away from where the big crowds are. There's an awful lot of support, Sam Armstrong, for farmers. And I wonder if we are entering the sort of fuel duty protest territory which afflicted the Blair government, where, we actually had go-slows, blockades of depots for fuel, and people were queuing up for, 10 hours to go and get fuel. The country came almost to a standstill, because you always have the idiots who barely ever drive their car but feel the need to go and fill up randomly. And of course, if everyone fills up every day, of course that's what happens. But they had an awful lot of support, those fuel duty protesters, the lorry drivers, back then. I've got a feeling that we're looking at similar support, and more people being able to understand how vital our British food supplies are. Again, more than half of the food we eat, the basic stuff that we eat every day, as opposed to a few exotic things we put, is actually produced in this country by farmers on this land, and they're going to go under.
Yeah, and I don't think this Labour Party is going to change its, or Labour government is going to change its mind on what it's done. Look, credit to them, actually. I think they've got a very clear idea of who their people are, right? I think they've worked out these are the kind of people that like to back us.
Universities.
People who work in the public sector, people who are heavily unionised industry. Right, they figured it out. They figured out these are our people.
Except that's not a majority.
Well, it turns out, Julia, you don't need to win a majority of the British public to walk into Downing Street with the biggest majority, with the biggest majority in recent memory.
That's our democratic system. But again, they only won 34% at the election, and again, largely it was Tory voters not voting Tory or Tory voters voting for reform. That was actually the reason why Labour lost. But they don't necessarily have. I'm just saying that it's all very well saying we're going to give pay rises to some, the train drivers, doctors. I can live with. There are fewer of them, but also it is incredibly highly skilled work, and there is a major issue with keeping doctors in the NHS. That is clearly a lot of it is price related. You've got to pay to keep good people. I'm sorry, I do believe in that. It's not just because I'm a doctor's daughter. I think it's highly skilled work. Train driving, with all due respect, is very important work, but it's not highly skilled work, and they're paid more than most junior doctors, i.e. highly skilled doctors with 10 years experience. But trying to keep those people happy is all very well. There aren't that many of them.
Nope.
80% of people don't work in the public sector.
Yep.
And that's, I think it's just so short-sighted. That we've got our mates, we're looking after our mates. Yeah, but you're doing it at the expense of everyone else.
This is, and I have no doubt at all, will be seen as, in historic terms, as one of the worst governments ever.
I mean, it's 5.5 months in. It's shocking how bad they are.
Speaking to people in Westminster, as I do every day, it's hard to overstate just how surprised people are about how bad it is. Right? They thought,
but even Labour supporters who thought they would, it's basically we're in Nirvana all of a sudden, honey and
I think
roses.
Within Westminster, nobody serious thought that this was going to be the land of milk and honey day one, right? The public finances are in the gutter. You've got difficult choices. The world's in a dark and dangerous place. But politics is about being able to make plays and do all the stuff you want to do. But it's also about just not making unforced errors.
Yeah.
And this government is just blundering into everything. And for a party that came in saying, oh, we're the serious lot.
Competence.
We're going to bring competence and decency back to these roles. We're going to bring integrity back to things. Well, there's not going to be any more lying and dishonesty. There's going to be no more scandals. Well, what have we got so far?
How's that working out for you?
And that is where I think they're going to come unstuck. However, all of the other parties of British politics remain pretty fatally split. And for as long as that happens, this Labour Party believes Morgan McSweeney, sat there in number 10, having dispatched with Sue Gray, is sitting pretty cosy in the belief that if he can hold together the coalition of people they've got, he can forget about everybody else.
I think they're going to have a funny wake-up call on it in 5 years' time. Just some breaking news. It does appear, well, Russian state media is reporting that Ukraine has already fired 6 of those US-made ATACMS long-range missiles into Russian territory. Now, we've had those warnings from the Kremlin already today about whether or not, if this did take place, that this would be seen as an act of war by NATO against Russia, and that there would be a tangible response, possibly even nuclear. Wondering how worried you are about that, Sam Armstrong. We were talking about farmers. Look, we've got apocalyptic weather out there. Are you feeling World War III-ish today, on the 1000th day since Ukraine was invaded by Russia?
I suspect not. Let's just tackle the claim first of all, which is balderdash, right? Russia seems to be saying that, OK, we have invaded Ukraine. We are sending long-range missiles every day, not just at its territory, at its capital city to blow up apartment blocks, by way of example.
Hospitals, nurseries.
And that's all fine. But should Ukraine fire a long-range missile back into our territory,
and a supply chain for the military,
the world would end. All of a sudden, we're staring down the barrel of nuclear apocalypse. It is preposterous, and actually, we should call it out every time they say it. There shouldn't be any space or quarter for lies like that.
Oh, well, it's all over the internet. Honestly, that's what I find amazing is the Russian bots on the internet are quite extraordinary in terms of actually pushing that message. But again, it is extraordinary, though, that we don't even know what's going to be happening with Ukraine at all after January the 20th. There's no way of knowing. You were talking about earlier about Donald Trump. I don't think, he says he's going to end the war in one day. Well, I think both Ukraine and Russia are keen on cementing their positions ahead of anything. But at the end of the day, you're only going to have peace if both sides agree. Putin's going to want to walk away with something, having gained something more than just Crimea. I don't see how, if you're Zelensky, if you're the Ukrainian people, you've fought and you've lost so much, you've seen your country damaged beyond all recognition, that you'd be willing at this point to go, oh well, let's just give over a lot of that land. Oh, by the way, any chance of having those kids back that you kidnapped? Any chance of that? And by the way, would you trust Russia with that border then? I don't see how anyone in Ukraine would agree to that. And I know something like they've got just over 50% support for the war continuing. The reality of the war ending is just more threats, not just for Ukraine, but for Moldova, but for Georgia, eventually the Baltic states. The Poles are not going to put up with anything. They're key members of NATO, of course. I do not understand why people don't get that we are talking about an existential threat to peace in Europe from Vladimir Putin, and it doesn't just involve Ukraine. And if I were a Ukrainian, I'd fight on to the bitter end.
I will say this, though, right? Ukraine is being kept, the Ukrainian war effort has been kept alive by US aid, frankly. And it isn't an issue, Donald Trump is right, that principally affects the US. They're half a world away. And it does affect European countries, much, much more so, who like, by the way, to go on the world stage and lecture other people about how important it is we stand with Ukraine. But what don't they do? Well, I tell you what they don't do. They don't provide arms, even when it's costly personally, to Ukraine. They don't stop buying Russian gas, right? They don't make it really expensive for them by putting genuine aid to them. And if Donald Tusk, if the EU, if Germany, if France, if they feel so strongly about this, then how about they do what the Poles do, what we did, frankly, doesn't affect us as much, and make it really painful, give them proper support. We wouldn't even need America.
No, absolutely. Put your money where your mouth is. Europe needs to stop expecting US taxpayers to pay for our defence. Absolutely. Now, we're going to talk to Andrew Fox about this coming up very soon. We're going to take a quick break now. We're going to get to more of your calls. Lots and lots of calls coming in about support for farmers. I'm also interesting a couple of calls about Rachel Reeves and possibly some porcupines on her CV. Has she broken the ministerial code of conduct, and should she resign? Wonder if you think that'll happen. Love to hear your thoughts. Get in touch either way. 0344 499 1000. This is Talk.
Nothing has been done to bring to justice these thugs that attack the policemen. We can see them doing that, and there's no issue with us saying that because no charges have been brought. So
Why do you think that is the case? Why has nothing been done, Isabel?
Well, I think that there's an anxiety on the part of the authorities. They're tiptoeing around because these people are from a particular demographic, and I can't see any other justification for not doing anything. So it's quite right that the Reform leadership has done this.
UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon to you. This is Talk, the home of common sense. Lots of your calls coming in on farmers. Thousands of farmers protesting at the new family farm inheritance tax at Westminster today. Give us a call, 0344 499 1000. You can text 87222. Get in touch on at Talk TV on Twitter or X. Dom says they feed us. To do so, they work long hours all year, no holidays, not much of an income, have huge risks with drought and disease, and have so much government regulation. No farm tax, he says. Ashley says 100% I support them. Starmer and Rachel, thieves tax rate, like we did there, on unrealised gains. Just because the land is worth X doesn't mean the farmer has Y. She says is Stalinist. All inheritance tax is theft, just a final insult after you pay tax all your life. Death taxing those who feed us is one step beyond. Angie says I absolutely do back them 100%. Without farmers there's no food here. It's all imported. We lose our food independence and the farmland is grabbed by the government WEF puppets. Leslie says we should all back the farmers. Without them our country would starve. We would be even in more debt as we would have to import all our food. Also, for our stupid, supposedly green government, our carbon footprint would exceed Bigfoot. And lastly, our farmers managing care for our green and pleasant land. And Tony says, yes, I back them. This is the start of things to come from the Labour Party, who are still mentioning the £22 million black hole as an excuse to go after the working man who voted for these liars. Well, let's go to the phone lines too. Mark is on the line. He's in Kent. Hello, Mark.
Hi, Julia.
Hello. What do you want to say? Do you back them or not?
Oh, 100%. I mean, we know it's politics of envy, the old school Marxism, socialism, etc. And I knew as soon as they got in, they would just jump straight back in it because they'd been out of power for so long. They're like, kids in a sweet shop. But the important thing is, they say it won't affect that many farmers.
Yeah.
But if it's not that many farmers, why are you bothering?
This is the thing, isn't it? That's what I remember. We've had like Sadiq Khan and congestion charge. Oh, it won't affect many people. Like, well, then you won't make a load of money from it. It won't have an impact. But they're talking about raising about $500 million. But that's not that much money in the big scheme of things.
No, they're going to give, what was it, $10 billion to Africa for climate change and another point, the national insurance on their employers.
Yeah.
Rachel Reeves said, it's just increasing 1.5% on the national insurance for the employers. And you think, well, actually, that's a complete lie because she doubled it because it went down from 9,500 until you start paying at the 5,000.
Yeah.
So effectively, she doubled employers' national insurance contributions in one sweep.
Yeah, I mean, and so many people affect. Well, we know retailers have been, pretty much all the major high street stores and chains and supermarkets have written a letter today, front page of the Times newspaper, about just the huge cost. It's going to mean they're going to close stores, they're not going to open new ones, they're going to have to limit jobs, wage rises are going to be limited, hire fewer people, and our prices are going to go up. And I mean, goodness me, if we have fewer farms producing food here, that's all going to happen as well, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, my wife employs a small business, 12 people, and so she's now got to double the national insurance contribution, which means that. But then you see, typical Labour, they're thinking, I'm not putting it up on the employee. It's just the rich employer.
Yeah, exactly. Just a complete lack of understanding of how businesses work and how employers make decisions. And as we see that even more so on farming, where they clearly don't understand it. Mark, I really appreciate your call. Thank you very much indeed. Just to let you know that Kemi Badenoch is currently addressing crowds at the farmers' protest in Westminster. Big cheer. She, of course, the Conservative leader. Will give you some lines on what she's been saying, which she's certainly been talking already about sort of negotiations that the farmers have to do with supermarkets, which they often come out very bad on. Again, I think supermarkets got a lot to be responsible for in terms of the low profit margins that we do see for farmers, which means they say, we're not going to be able to pay inheritance tax because we simply don't have the funds. Let's go to another call now, though. Actually, this is more on focusing on Rachel Reeves. Martin is in Cambridge. Hello, Martin.
Hello, Julia.
You're very chirpy. What's going on with you?
Well, I think the first brick is about to fall in this godforsaken government. Basically, I was looking online yesterday, and her original manager at HBOS has gone on LinkedIn, and he basically stated that Rachel Reeves was just a junior. She was basically on the complaints desk, and also there was her and two other colleagues nearly got sacked for over-expenses scandal.
Yes. Now, I need to, for legal reasons, this one, I have seen that LinkedIn post. By all accounts, this man checks out, and he did do the job he did.
Yeah. So allegedly,
but I'm not in a position. So obviously Rachel Reeves hasn't responded to these allegations. I just felt for legal reasons I cannot verify any of this. No. It doesn't seem anyone can verify anything that Rachel Reeves has done either, which is a bit confusing. But yeah, question marks. It does appear that people who actually worked at the time said this isn't true. None of this is true. It does. There's one thing, isn't it? There's forgetting whether or not you did or did not win a chess championship as a child. That's neither here nor there, really. Yeah. Bit embarrassing. But then there's being confused. Let's be charitable. Being confused about how long you worked somewhere and what your job was when you were there. That's pretty worrying, isn't it, in someone who's controlling the purse strings and making decisions about other people's lives, like, farmers, for instance.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it wasn't 10 years, it was 6. And then she was allegedly made to resign from HBOS
again
because of
Rachel Reeves is in a position. I haven't got a position where I can get a statement from her on this. I'm just for legal reasons. I've got to be really careful about this. I'm so sorry.
Basically, the whole government is seemingly based on a tissue of lies and duplicity. I mean, they make Boris Johnson look like the patron saint of honesty. And the other thing is, everybody's going to become. I'll go off the head with another 4 more years of this. I mean, we've got to put with Starmer that.
Careful, keep it clean.
That male appendage droning on every week. I mean, the man, it's just absolutely outrageous. I mean, you've got Martha Reeves and the Vandellas, the old Vandals, doing her thing. You've got David Lamentable. I mean, it's shocking.
You're not a fan. I think you can safely say not a fan. Before you get me in any more trouble, Martin, I'm going to leave it there, Martin in Cambridge. Thank you very much indeed. I have to say, Sam Armstrong was enjoying all of that. Just like Kemi Badenoch, I say, she's just been addressing crowds at the farmers' protest in Westminster. She's told farmers, on behalf of the Conservative Party, we have your back and we understand the burden farmers carry. Sam Armstrong, look, you were actually running the campaign for her biggest rival, Robert Jenrick, and did a very, very good job, I think people would agree. He was certainly appearing on here regularly and appearing everywhere, and we got to know a lot about him. He went from, pretty much, and also ran at the beginning to being the final rival for Kemi Badenoch, who'd been tipped together all along. Is this a good opportunity for the Conservatives to sort of claw back support? Not that given the state of the polls for Labour right now, there's not much support left for them as it is. But in terms of winning over people in rural constituencies who they've lost?
Well, look, I think they certainly need to be in the space that they are in, and I think Kemi Badenoch is doing what she needs to do here. Look, she's not alone there. Nigel Farage is there too, and it's clear that he's getting amongst the crowds. There's lots of people, lots of support. I was surprised to see just how warm a reception he was getting as he was walking through.
I would not be surprised by that at all.
Farmers. So the Conservative Party absolutely have to be competitive. But look, there's 2 things here. Firstly, I think they're going to retain a credibility problem within the rural community. The changes that Michael Gove made to the agricultural subsidies programme have caused a lot of anger amongst farmers, changing it from paying people for food production to paying them for environmental measures. And secondly, it's not going to be enough. I think there is widespread support for farmers, but if I know one thing about voters, we are, rightly in my view, a pretty selfish bunch, right? We care about what you're going to do for us. And I think there'll be enormous sympathy for farmers, as there was for lorry drivers under Tony Blair in the early 2000s. It wasn't enough to stop Tony Blair winning a seat. Again, why? Because he could control the coalition. And I think Kemi is going to have to keep reaching out to working people. She keeps about working people. She's got every chance.
OK, really interesting. Thank you very much, Steve. We're going to take a quick break. More of your texts and calls coming up. After that, we're going to be hearing from Andrew Fox, a defence expert, on what is the latest with Ukraine on 1000th day since that invasion by Vladimir's Russian forces. This is Talk.
UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon to you. This is Talk, the home of common sense. 12:38 is the time. Sam Armstrong's still with me. Delighted to be joined right now by Andrew Fawkes. He's a defence expert and research fellow at the Henry Jackson Society and a former military man himself. Good afternoon to you.
Hi, Julia.
Thank you so much for joining us. I mean, what a really auspicious day. 1,000 days now since the invasion of Ukraine by Russian forces back in February 2022. At the time, Vladimir Putin said it would be a matter of days before they took Kyiv, a matter of weeks before they took the whole country. Didn't quite work out like that. We are now in a raging battle still in the east of the south of the country. 1,600 Russian troops either killed or seriously injured every single day to take a matter of a few miles of territory. Threats from Donald Trump when he becomes American president on January the 20th that he will make sure there's peace within one day. And these ongoing rows about these long-range missiles. Russia has said today that those long-range missiles from America, the ATACMS, have already, given after permission from Biden on Monday, have already been used on Russian territory. Threats of a tangible, in Kremlin's words, response, possibly even nuclear. How bad is it right now, and where are we heading, Andrew?
We've heard the word red line, or the words red lines, a lot over the last 2-3 years. There was a red line on provision of HIMARS, the artillery system, to Ukraine. There was a red line on the Patriot missile defense system to Ukraine. There was a red line on modern Western tanks to Ukraine. There was a red line on F-16s as well. And all of those red lines have been crossed with pretty much minimal comeback from Russia. In terms of nukes, Putin said he would use nuclear weapons in the event of an existential threat to the Russian state. It's very hard to argue that firing ATACMS into Russia is existential for them. So I'd be very surprised if Putin escalated to nukes. And of course, mutually assured destruction, our old friend from the 70s and 80s, is still hanging around, and we still have nukes too.
Yeah.
And it would be a deeply foolish move for Putin to escalate to that level. So yeah, that's kind of where it stands. I mean, I don't think it's going to make any kind of a decisive difference in the war, Ukraine being able to strike inside Russian territory, but every little helps.
And yet there's been so much focus on it. It seems that since all the way back from February 2022, it's been a constant sort of battle of going on in the West of, which countries are going to support Ukraine, what are they going to give them? Are they going to say they're going to give it and then not actually deliver it? And when they deliver it, are they going to provide the backup, the maintenance, the training for it? And then each time it's been, we need jets, we need the tanks, we need the long-range missiles as well as the short-range and the medium-range missiles. And then each thing that's asked for, gradually, very slowly, the cranking wheels of international diplomacy, they eventually do get offered and do get used. But it doesn't seem to be turning the war around. There were so many hopes about, 6 months, a year ago, that Ukraine could turn it around. Russia, if you actually look at the map, Russia has not taken that much Ukrainian territory, but they've taken some very important strategically territory. In terms of how this ends, assuming it ever does, there are wars that have never ended that carry on the skirmishes, and it's been going on since 2014, realistically, not just since 2022. What is the process by which it could end? What would Putin be willing to accept? What would Zelensky and the Ukrainian people be willing to accept?
My concern at the moment is the deal that people are roughly talking about, essentially freezing the conflict in place. It's really a win for Russia. They will have seized a significant strategic piece of Ukrainian territory. They will have conducted a variety of appalling war crimes with absolutely no comebacks. And, in any ceasefire negotiation, the kind of one sop they've said they're prepared to throw is EU membership for Ukraine. But the rest of it will be EU membership of NATO, keeping the terrain. They've got a Russian-facing presidency in Kyiv. And these aren't really options that Ukraine can accept. And the real issue, I think, with Mr. Trump's position is that he might well be condemning hundreds of thousands of more Ukrainians to death, because I'm not sure Ukraine are in a position where they can surrender on those terms.
Well, that's the thing. I've asked repeatedly whenever we've discussed this on social media or here, which part of Britain would we be willing to give up to an invading force like that? And then people then unhelpfully do actually suggest a lot of places. London often comes up. It has to be said. But the reality, what people have gone through in Ukraine, the number of lives lost for them, the devastation to their towns and villages and cities, and their economy, it's just been children abducted. I mean, thousands of children abducted to Russia, never seen again. No nation state would put up with this. And of course, there are still so many people in the West, and supported by those Russian bots that are all over everywhere. Telling us that this is a war that it was Ukraine's fault. It was and the West's fault. Putin had no choice because it was supposed to be a buffer state, and it's not a war we should worry about. It's not our problem. It's their problem. Why is what happens in Ukraine our problem? Why should we still care?
So there's a geopolitical alignment, which is a really boring academic way of saying it depends what kind of world you want to live in. Do you want to live in a world that still is dominated by a Western way of thinking where we cherish freedom and democracy and our values? Or do we want to live in a world dominated by the Chinese-Russian alliance where totalitarian states get to dictate to the rest of the world? And this is really the pivotal battle of our time, is authoritarian dictatorships versus the Western freedom and democracy that we've taken for granted since the end of 1945. And this is really playing out in Ukraine right now. And if we give Russia a victory, that is going to embolden them and China in future. So we will see a war in Taiwan. We will see increased subversion around Europe as Russia tries to undermine our democratic systems.
And which it's doing right now. It's doing it in Georgia. It's doing it in Moldova. It's already doing it in the Baltic states, which are NATO members. Sweden, I mean, goodness me, the Swedish government have actually issued statements to citizens telling them to prepare for war. I mean, they've actually, they are taking it that seriously. We've seen Sweden and Finland, applying for swift membership of NATO because they are so fearful. Finland knows full well what a Russian invasion looks like. It's happened to them before. But this is the thing. What I find amazing, whether it's Donald Trump, his aides, or anyone else saying, well, just do a deal, get peace. That's better than war. And so, do they genuinely think that Vladimir Putin is going to stick to whatever territory he's able to take this time? Why on earth would we trust the word of a man who is a proven liar and murderous dictator?
Well, why indeed? And, Russia have signed documents in the past saying that they would protect and respect Ukraine's borders. Yeah. That they're obviously in clear violation of, and we also agreed that we...
I was just going to say, we also have a duty of care along with the US.
And we've failed in it so far. As far as I'm concerned, over the last 1,000 days, we've protected Russia from the consequences of its actions, whilst forcing Ukraine to fight with one hand tied behind their back. And it's appalling. And there's a lot of Ukrainian blood on Western leaders' hands for the delays and the politicking that have been in getting the right equipment and
And fundamentally, that's about weakness, isn't it? Because we're told, we don't want World War III. But Vladimir Putin knows that the West is weak. He knows it's right. He knows that people worry. OK, we've got no money either. But he knows that, and he plays on that. That he knows that Western economies can't just put 40% of their government spending into military like he's done. And he's playing on it. But when your adversary knows that about you and you don't do anything to change that, I mean, we're in very dangerous territory, aren't we?
Well, that's the great strength that the totalitarian states have in this battle against democracies, is we have accountability and politicians have to justify their decisions to their electorates, whereas he can do whatever he wants, and so can President China. So can the Ayatollah in Tehran.
Well, mentioning Xi Jinping, an urgent House of Commons has been an urgent question from the opposition about arrests in Hong Kong and pro-democracy campaigners who've been jailed, some for up to 10 years, total of 45 of them in Hong Kong. I mean, these aren't people who broke what we consider laws in this country. These are people simply, trying to actually stand for election, supporting people who just want a democracy in Hong Kong. Something, again, we signed a treaty that we would support and the rights of people in Hong Kong. Again, we ain't good for our word anymore, Andrew. We really are not. And the Chinese obviously have full control of Hong Kong now. And these people, the day after, within hours of Keir Starmer sitting down for a nice meeting face-to-face with Xi Jinping of China at the G20 summit in Rio de Janeiro, they basically orchestrate the jailing after mock trials of democracy campaigners. I mean, the West doesn't know what it's doing anymore. Are we ever going to stand up for anyone ever again?
No, I think we still have a hangover from the era where the Berlin Wall came down and we assumed that that was the end of history and everyone was going to be a Western liberal democracy from now on. And we had a degree of hiatus between that way of thinking when the jihadist threat came up and Iraq and Afghanistan happened. But now we're in an era where our totalitarian enemies have had 20 years to work out what our weaknesses are and attack those through a variety of democratic, economic, subversive and military means. And we are now on the back foot trying to catch up, and half of our countries don't even realise that we're in this fight quite yet. And we are. Ukraine is the front line.
Absolutely. Andrew Fox, really appreciate you joining us. He's a defence expert, research fellow at the Henry Jackson Society. Sam Armstrong, I do think that people simply don't get what existential battle we're in with the autocratic, axis of evil that we're in. I don't. When people on the left often like throw around the 1930s references, when the 1930s is staring you in the face, they don't see it.
We are being boiled slowly like frogs so that we don't notice. Look, here's the truth of it. We went through the last century in the Cold War against the USSR, which was no doubt an existential threat, and people recognise that. But all through that time, it was a much, 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 much smaller economic force than we were. It was a smaller geopolitical force. And the same just will not be true in the next century. China will be bigger than us, stronger than us, wealthier than us. And it's coming for us.
I mean, again, people just got to get it. Just going back to the farmers' protest before we go to a break, Jeremy Clarkson, just after Kimmy Badenoch spoke as a Tory leader, she said that farmers need protection. We understand you've been doing this all your lives. Without you, we cannot eat. And farmers are carrying the burden for the whole country. But Jeremy Clarkson had rather stronger words in speaking as he arrived at the protest this morning. He said that Labour had, and I've been given permission to use this word, have cocked up and should back down. He said the tax changes. He says it was like they could have used a sniper's rifle to take in the likes of the investment bankers buying up land. Instead, Rachel Reeves has used a blunderbuss and has hit all this lot. It was, he says, as I understand it, a very rushed last-minute decision. I think we all make mistakes in life. I think it's time for them to say, you know what, we've cocked this one up a bit and back down. He has also ended with a message for the government in his speech saying, for the sake of everybody here and all the farmers stuck at home today, paralysed by a fog of despair by what's been foisted upon them, I beg the government to accept this was rushed through, wasn't thought out, was a mistake. That's the big thing to do. Admit it and back down. That's Jeremy Clarkson to the government at the farmers' protest today. Coming up next, we're going to talk about the latest chaos at British Airways and indeed chaos on the road and rails as a result of the snow across much of the country. We'll talk to Simon Calder live at King's Cross Station. This is Talk.
Bloomberg UK reporting Ukraine has made the first long-range missile strike inside of Russia. These are the missiles that Biden has approved for the use by Ukraine. It appears that Ukrainian defense forces struck a military facility on Russian territory. Earlier today, the Kremlin issued a threat to say that if Ukraine did strike any facilities in Russia, that would produce a nuclear response, their words, against Ukraine, presumably.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense. Sam Armstrong is still with me. I want to talk right now, though, about, well, we've got a bit of chaos on the roads and the rails as a result of the snow, a bit of drizzle and sleet down the south of the country, but Midlands and North, a lot of snow around. But also, why getting a plane with British Airways seems to be just such a very difficult thing these days after their latest IT meltdown, which left loads of flights grounded, passengers left stranded across Europe, still impacted now. Well, let's talk about all of this with Simon Calder, who's travel correspondent at The Independent, and he's live for us at King's Cross Station. So, Simon, first up, what happened at BA and why do they still have problems with their IT pretty much every week these days?
Well, to be fair, Julia, they say that they didn't actually have particularly bad problems, and certainly if you compare it with what we saw in when there were about 2,000 flights cancelled, 200 flights cancelled, which hit 30,000 passengers, and then going back to May 2017, massive IT failure, which effectively closed down the whole BA operation over a bank holiday weekend.
But it always seems to happen to them. Why? Have they got massively old systems? Is there a problem? I mean, last time round, wasn't part of the problem that was an engineer was at home, he couldn't fix it because his log-on didn't work and he had to travel a couple of hours to get in. I mean, hey, working from home doesn't work, but it only seems to happen to this airline.
Well, yes, that was actually the NATS crisis on August bank holiday last year, and not actually British Airways' fault at all. They say that their main system failed last night about 10 past 5 in the afternoon. Immediately the backup started, so there shouldn't have been too much of a problem. But actually, for over an hour and a half, they were finding really serious problems dispatching their aircraft because, bluntly, the pilots couldn't communicate with head office and get all the information that was needed. Passengers, meanwhile, found that... Well, it is crucial. You can do it on the phone, and that was, I understand, how some of them did it. But it was regrettable. They had just put out a statement saying it could have been much worse. There were no cancellations on our mainline network as a result. We never want to inconvenience customers. We've apologised to those who did face delays, and we're grateful to them for their patience.
But it doesn't half keep happening, though. Look, I know also we've only got about 30 seconds left, but we've also had thousands of train passengers. Rather more people get trains than planes most days today as a result of the snow. East Midlands Railway, pretty much half of their services have been cut, haven't they?
Been lots of cancellations on East Midlands Railways, particularly Nottingham to Worksop. We've also got lots of problems in the north of England, West Yorkshire, and also the line in Cumbria around Ulverston from Manchester Airport to Barrow. South Western Railways, loads of delays because of adverse weather there, and the RAC says that there's going to be lots of problems for drivers continuing into tomorrow.
Wrong kind of weather, wrong kind of time of the year, wrong kind of snow, wrong kind of rain, unit, wrong kind of computer at BA. Simon Calder, thank you for joining us. Short but sweet, travel correspondent at The Independent, Sam Armstrong. We're really not very good at sort of just coping with life in this country, are we?
I'm just shocked we haven't seen leaves on the railway tracks.
Yeah, absolutely. It's only a matter of time. Only a matter of time. Still with us, joining us now is Ian Collins. Good afternoon.
I was explaining to a little boy leaves on the railway tracks this morning.
Wrong
we
kind.
were just talking, because there was drains cover up with leaves.
Well,
I said wrong kind. He said, "What do you mean? Trains stop?" I said, "Yes."
Yes, I've got my walking boots on today because